Right, good morning, members. Welcome to the Planning Committee for the ominous Friday, the 13th of September. And the first item, actually, I haven't signed the attendance list yet, so I hope it's around there somewhere. Will you make sure, please, that you all sign the attendance list? Apologies for absence. I've got Dermot Murphy, who has not been well and hopes to be able to join us, I think, in about a month's time. I've also got an apology for Councillor Hart, but I don't know whether it's for being here or not being here.
My operation is proved successful.
Oh, well, welcome back. Good for you. Thank you very much. We've no other. Who's there? We've no other apologies, have we? No. Okay. Minutes of the last meeting held on the 9th of August. I'm happy to move those as a correct record. Is that seconded? Has anybody got any comments on the accuracy of the minutes? If not, all those in favour of adopting the minutes. Anyone against? Those are adopted. Thank you very much. No urgent business. Public participation will occur as we go along. Declarations of interest.
Yes.
Yes. Can I start first and then we'll take the rest of you up? We have the two applications from the authority for the barn at North Lees and the facility at Parsley Hay. In relation to North Lees, can I just say that I, Ginny and Ken Smith have all three of us been briefed on the awkward situation we find ourselves in with the North Lees application, with two parts of the authority not quite agreeing on what should be done in that case. But we have all of us not committed ourselves to any view on anything, and we have an open mind on the outcome. Have we got any other declarations of interest?
Rose Cottage. Rose Cottage. It's my parish, and I've been involved with the parish council in discussing the application. So I've got a serious conflict of interest there.
Okay, and you will be leaving the room for that
Yes.
item. Thank you very much. Rachel, did you have one?
Yeah, I know Simon Geddy, I've got it professionally, so I don't think it is, I don't think I need to leave the room, but I'm just declaring that I know professionally.
That's fine, thank you very much indeed. Ginny?
I just mentioned for us all that some of us know.
Martin,
Jane
can
Newman.
these lights come off please so we can...
Some of us
Martin
know
and
Jane Newman.
Mike, I think you've got...
Sorry, Ginny?
Jenny's...
Oh, we all have an interest in Jane Newman, I think, is what Ginny is trying to tell us. Are there any other interests to be declared? No? Okay, thank you very much indeed. In that case, we can move on to the first item on the agenda, which is the, indeed, it's the facility at Main Road, Hathersage. John, you're taking this, are you?
I am, Chair, thank you. Good morning, everybody. This is a full application for the proposed reuse of a garage and store as a mixed-use building with flexible space that can be purposed for residential and business use at the garage/store land to the rear of the former Royal Bank of Scotland Main Road in Hathersage. The application site is on the screen now, edged in red. It's sited to the rear of commercial property which fronts onto the main street in the centre of the village of Hathersage and is also within the conservation area. You have the main street here. The access is between two retail properties on the frontage. It leads behind those properties. It's also shared with the public right-of-way. That public footpath and right-of-way continues on past residential development to recreation ground, cricket ground. This is the building. We'll see photographs of it in a moment. There's parking outside. Again, we'll see on both sides of the access road. There is a footpath access here to the south side of the application site, which leads to this rear garden to what's called the Sintress Tea Rooms, which is sited there. Beyond that is the George Hotel in its car park. There's woodland to the north of the site. So moving on, this is a closer view of the layout. Access from the main street coming from the bottom of the slide here. There's the existing building, which you begin to see is a tin corrugated roof building there. There's 5 parking spaces to the, or 6, sorry, counting those, to the front. And the existing building has been used for ad hoc storage and parking for many years. You can see there's a tree to the rear. This is a small, very poor condition, older, and there are some sycamore trees just immediately north of the building. So the proposed layout, the proposal is for the reuse or repurposing of the garage to provide, in the applicant's description, a flexible mixed-use business-stroke dwelling. And he stressed to us, and we heard on the site visit yesterday, that it's not for a replacement building. He seeks to retain the internal frame of the building, and we had a good look at that on site, along with the boarding to that framing, and encapsulate that within new fabric. However, the fact remains, in the officer's view, that there is a considerable amount of alteration, and we'll see that in the plans, which involves one new extension to the south. So that's a new extension on the slide here to the south of the building. And the existing extension, you can just see dotted to the front, or the projecting lean-to, is replaced in its entirety and extended southwards, whereas the existing main body of the building is the walls are clad internally and externally to insulate the building. There's a new raised floor and a new roof with insulation on top of the existing framework. So the building you'll see on the plans does raise up by about 300 millimetres, and it's reclad with a similar dark black corrugated sheeting along with new fenestration. But I'll go through the slides and show you those details. And you can see there as well the 4 parking spaces remain in front, maintaining the right-of-way clear. And so there are no concerns about, from a highway point of view, because it's a fairly equivalent use in terms of traffic generation. And we'll see in the slides, this tree is of no merit, so there's no concerns about losing that. And the nature of the construction wouldn't harm the tree, so there are no concerns about trees subject to appropriate mitigation. So, moving on to the next slide to show you the context. So, this is the main street in the background with access between the former Royal Bank of Scotland, which is now a cafe, deli building. This is an outdoor clothing equipment shop. This is the building in question on the right. You can see the sycamore tree, which is in fairly close proximity, and the parking spaces to the front. Just a close-up of the access. And then a better view of the building itself, showing the parking. So you see the character of that, and the access down the side. It's a slightly lower level to the rear tea room garden, which comes into more view there. So you see the character of the building. It's a fairly basic utilitarian garage storage building, which officers regard to be of no particular merit. It's tucked away around the back, so in that respect it's inoffensive, but it couldn't be said to conserve or enhance the conservation area. And views from the George Hotel car park, looking back at the existing building, you see in the background quite clearly with this is the garden of the tea room in the middle ground. So, just going through the detailed plans. That's the existing front elevation and as proposed. So you see, you just make out the dotted line of the existing building there. So you can see the roof is raised slightly. This is the new extension to the left, which has a hipped roof form. There is a timber enclosure for an air source heat pump here, and this is the replacement extension, which is widened to the full width of the building. And these are glazed, full glazed fixed panels behind what would be timber louvers. And on the right hand side there's a small area you'll see in the plan with access to doors on both sides. It's just a more closer view of the same. So that's the side elevation facing the footpath to the Cintrus tea room, and as proposed. So you see the hipped extension there, and the air source heat pump enclosure in the middle, and new glazed doors within this lean-to, which is raised up to provide more height. You can see again, you see the outline of the existing building. And the rear view, and as proposed with roof lights lighting the building. And the other end, looking back towards the main street as existing, and as proposed with the new fenestration and lean-to. So it can be seen in the photographs and these slides that from the officer's view, the building doesn't contribute anything to the character of the village. It's not a valued vernacular or a listed building, and as I said, we conclude it detracts from that. We also don't consider it to be a non-designated heritage asset, a view which is also supported by our conservation officers. There are also concerns about the large glazed panels we've seen to the front, which don't reflect the Peak District building tradition or the character of the existing building, and neither does the form of the hip-roofed extension. In terms of internal layout, the proposal is to be absolutely clear. It's for essentially a market dwelling with shared space for business use. The layout, I don't know whether you can see it here, is this, the frontal area here is a bed space and a kitchen with left of this line being a studio, and the hip roof extension housing a small bathroom and shower room, and the parking to the front. It's just an aerial view showing the roof lights. And this shows a cross section. So as I said before, the existing framework, the agent explained, is being retained and reinforced as necessary. There'll be new columns within there to support that, and the framing and the cladding, timber cladding we saw, will be retained and encapsulated within insulated walls either side, and new external tin sheeting to the external leaf. The existing ground floor, which is concrete at the moment, will be retained, and a new raised timber floor suspended above on screws set on plates and insulated, hence the need to push up the roof to provide the necessary headroom. That just shows that in a little bit more detail. So, in summary, as I said, there are no highway concerns or concerns about the impact on the trees. And we, of course, recognise and indeed applaud that the applicant's desire to create a more sustainable building with low levels of embodied carbon and reuse as much of the material as possible, as well as the introduction of the air source heat pump. However, all of those indeed positive measures don't overcome the fact that the proposal seeks to substantially alter a building which doesn't contribute positively to the area. And we consider the resulting form, materials and the fenestration in particular would exacerbate the untraditional character of the existing building and perpetuate the harm that it currently causes, and indeed enhance that. It doesn't conserve or involve the conversion of a traditional valued vernacular building or conserve or enhance the settlement. So it's therefore not compliant with our housing policy HC1. And although it would also create some business space, which in principle is acceptable, it doesn't pick up the opportunity to bring about necessary enhancement that policy allows. Furthermore, the resulting harm to the conservation area wouldn't be outweighed by any public benefits, and consequently we don't believe it reaches the high bar necessary to achieve significant enhancement required within policy GSP2. So for all those reasons, Chair, we recommend refusal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have the one speaker, Jane. When you're ready.
The application proposes the reuse of an existing building. It is a proposal driven by a real desire to deliver a functional and attractive building while minimising carbon emissions. The UK has legally binding targets to reduce its carbon emissions by 80% by 2050, and while we all try and make good choices, the reality is that small changes like drinking out of compostable cups and recycling paper waste isn't enough for us to meet these targets. The construction industry is responsible for 25% of the UK's carbon emissions, and although new buildings are more energy efficient, constructing new buildings doesn't result in the UK meeting our targets because of the amount of carbon typically emitted in constructing a new building. The carbon emitted in building a new house is on average 45,000 kilograms. The annual operational saving of carbon through greater energy efficiency is 1,300 kilograms. This means that the carbon embodied in the initial construction is not offset for 34 years. Refurbishing existing buildings avoids the release of carbon already embodied in buildings and reduces waste generation. It is a significant part of the solution to reducing carbon emissions associated with construction. In this particular instance, the refurbishment involves retaining the internal structure of the building and the existing base. A timber cantilevered floor will be inserted on top of the existing base. This removes the need to have poured concrete foundations, which are a considerable source of carbon emissions. Insulation will be used, which derives from natural and recycled sources. The existing steel sheeting is beyond repair. New steel sheeting will be used, which uses 4.6% of the embodied carbon equivalent that would be emitted in a building of the same size constructed from natural stone. The building is over 100 years old and dates from the period in which the railway first arrived in Hathersage. The arrival of the railway was a major stimulus for growth and a major chapter in Hathersage's development, bringing in new materials, goods and industries. While the original use of the building at the site is unknown, its structure is clearly intended to perform a functional role and most likely served a light industrial use, which would have supported the town's economy. Evidence of industry on these sites behind the more prominent and substantial buildings of the main thoroughfares should not be viewed as incongruous within the context of Hathersage's historic development, but an essential part of it. Although gritstone and slate are the prevalent traditional materials in the settlement, it is inaccurate to conclude that they're the only acceptable materials. To focus on preserving only those materials risks eroding the variety that reflects Hathersage's history. It's essential to curate a mixture of materials to preserve the integrity and honesty of the character of the conservation area. This avoids it being sanitised and gentrified to the extent that it's an inauthentic reflection of the historic development of the settlement. Although the building could be described as utilitarian, this does not mean that the building is not of inherent heritage value, although our heritage consultant obviously disagrees with the authority's conservation officer. Functional buildings of its age are rare, especially within a central urban area where its original use has long since passed. Its difference from the surrounding development is a defining and valuable historic characteristic. It is therefore appropriate to describe the building as a non-designated heritage asset. The scheme will result in the retention of the industrial character and give the building a sustainable future use which will contribute to the economy and community of Hathersage.
Thank you very much. Right. Members. Right. Sorry, Bill. Yes.
Thank you. I thought, as a Hathersage resident and on the councillor and the parish council, I thought I'd sort of perhaps provide some context and some thoughts on this. I'm not aware of any. I'm not on the. We have a planning committee, but I'm not on that, and I'm not aware of any comments of the planning committee either. I don't know if there has been any. I don't think there has. I just to say I've lived in Hathersage a long time, and I've walked past there's a footpath that goes past the site many times, and I must admit the site you never really notice it. It's just tucked there, and you just walk past. So that I found interesting. So that having just come across this application in the last week or so, I thought that was an interesting fact in itself. I've been past it both ways many times. I think on sort of positive side, there's a use of the site, and the on the site visit yesterday, and the agents just explained there is an interesting attempt, a very good attempt to use existing materials to avoid the, building anew, getting rid of everything. So a good attempt to use the floor, the fabric, the wood that's already there. And there is some primary residential use proposed as well, although I'm not actually clear whether that's actually residential use. It looks like a sort of precursor to holiday use to me, but I mean, I know that specifically wants to be excluded from the application by conditions. I think on the other side, I think there will be a loss of, I know this may not be part of what we can do here, but there will be a loss of car parking to local residents. And I must emphasise, I can't, as you've heard me before in this room say, car parking is absolutely a critical thing in Hathersage. To lose 2 resident spaces means there's 2 less spaces in the village, and every time we lose spaces, it just puts more pressure on car park in the village, which there doesn't seem to be a solution to. I have solutions, but no, you know, there are solutions, but anyway, we're not grasping them. So I would think if any consent is granted, I would think we need perhaps having 4 spaces for such a small unit. There might be an opportunity to retain at least 1 space. I think you can get actually up to 5 or 6 spaces there in that on that site. So I'd like us to consider that. So yeah, on the positive side, there's a conservation of materials. On the downside, there is obviously quite clearly non-traditional materials. I don't accept there's any heritage value in that site. It's just something that exists in a bit of a space at the back, and it's a convenient. It's worked as a store or a garage or whatever for many years. So that obviously traditional materials would produce a much better building and would enhance the conservation area. And I also think there's a potential loss on that site to produce some affordable housing, a small affordable housing unit that's built in traditional materials, and that would provide 1 or 2 parking spaces in a very convenient location in the village. So, you know, there's a loss of an opportunity there. And I also think there's the photo from the George car park, and which you could also see from the Sintra's cafe seating area at the back of that facility, which is next door to the site, shows the lack of heritage value of that building. It's quite, it really doesn't enhance, and any change to that, which I believe includes slightly raising that, would detract from the conservation area. So I think there's a, you know, so that's a sort of a balanced opinion there, really, of what I feel as a local resident and councillor.
Thank you very much. Well, Kath?
Thank you, Chair. My concerns are point 17. We look at the Highway Authority. The comments were made to a different application in 2019, and it's not the same as what we've got here now. And I think they should be consulted again as to whether they are in total agreement, because I think the parking, the highways in, well, as Bill has said, there is a problem, and I think that is sort of needs updating, their comments.
Yes, I do think members should be a bit careful about saying, well, we would like public car parking to continue on a private site. I mean, the owner can stop car parking on the site at any time. It's not a public facility. It's not really particularly relevant to this particular application. And I just think we should be a little bit careful about that as a way forward. It seems to me that this is a very imaginative, and I don't mean that in a Sir Humphrey way, but it's a very imaginative and really rather interesting project. And the underlying, Jane has emphasised all this environmental stuff and so on and so forth, which is not altogether my comfort zone. But for me, the idea of combining the workspace and the facility for young people to live and so forth as part of the business is actually an imaginative one, and one which I suspect if we could do it here, because we've been having our own problems in that respect in relation to this building and so forth, is one we'd like to try and find ways of doing. And I don't think it matters whether this is a heritage building or whether it isn't. It's there. It's a building which does no harm in its environment. And I take Jane's point that this sort of building is part of the history of an area in its way. It doesn't make it a heritage building. It's what's there. What I'm struggling with this, I have to be honest with you, more than anything else, is where the conservation and enhancement comes in relation to the conservation area. And it seems to me that the way this is being presented is actually quite a stark change from what's there now, and really is difficult to accommodate within what we normally expect to see in a conservation area, if I can put it that way round. I don't know whether members have any views on that. Andrew.
Yeah, the principle of live work's been around for quite a substantial length of time. It gets in and out of fashion. And the last time it was fashionable was about 20 years ago. But it does solve a problem within an area, particularly for people who want to start businesses and can't afford to live and to work in the same area because they can't afford the cost. So it has a merit from that point of view. And the building is what it is, and any enhancement to that building should be valued, because otherwise the applicant may decide to do absolutely nothing with it, stop the car parking there, and we lose quite a few things. So I'm undecided on this, whether it's worth, shall we say, putting my neck out for it, and I'd like to hear comments from other members of Planning Applications Committee.
Mike?
Well, clearly Bill knows the area probably the best around this table, from how local residents would see it. The one thing I'm struggling with, and Jane brought it to the fore in her comments, is about the use of this would need replacement steel sheeting, because the old steel or the old sheeting is clearly no longer fit for purpose. The steel industry is going through its own convulsions over climate change, and it's recognised that there are greener ways to produce steel. And I'm not convinced that in obtaining a supply of suitable steel sheeting, it would be the one that's generated through electric production, electric arc furnace, or similar methods. It can just as easily have come from a more traditional method which burns up an awful lot of carbon. So I'm not entirely convinced by that argument. The other thing, I suppose, goes back to Bill's point. When you grow up in an area, I lived fairly close to a railway station growing up, so I got used to hearing the trains going by hour after hour. And so you tend to sort of, your body sort of naturally sort of learns to ignore that. But looking at the picture there, the building doesn't sit right in a conservation area, to my mind. Perhaps so I'm going closer to what you're saying.
It sort of sits comfortably as it is, but not as proposed, if I can put it. Yes. Sorry, any other members got any points to make? Ken?
If I may, the proposal is for reuse of a garage and store, but I just wonder the extent of the refurbishment. At what point does it become a rebuild? Because what we're looking at is a complete removal of the exterior cladding and its replacement, the heightening of the roof, a change to the element at the front, which is the most visual, its enlargement, an annex, call it what you will, to the south side, the left-hand side. At what point do we say, actually, this is more akin to new build than it is to a refurbishment? the change to the character of the, let's call it fenestration, the windows at the front, there's part of me thinks this is a step too far. I mean, going back to your earlier comments, Chair, I think it's commendable. It's a really innovative consideration of how this building might be reused, but the extent to which there is change and alteration, I have my reservations as to whether it is appropriate, frankly.
Andrew, and then I'm going to
Chair,
wind up.
thank you for letting me come back. I've been sitting here thinking this has connotations of the Hume End engine shed. If you remember, many years ago there was an application within the Peak Park, I think it was Staffordshire Moorlands application, to reuse the old engine shed there. It wasn't all universally received within the village. There were one or two notable opposition against it. But when you go into these sort of semi-industrial railway buildings type thing, you find that it needs some more substantial restoration than was first thought. In the case of Hume End, they stored salt in it. So, of course, all the steel at the bottom of the shed had rotted away. But that was the Staffordshire County Council's fault. They didn't do anything to protect the building. But steel shed buildings, they have a life. The steel has a life. With the best maintenance in the world, it only lasts a certain length of time. But just casting members back to that application that was quite controversial at the time to create that visitor centre, which is a very successful cafe at the moment and attracts a tremendous amount of visitors there. And I think we rent one of the Peak Park rents one of the buildings for cycle hire next door, all part of the same complex. So that sort of makes me think this does have some merit, and I'll take it on advisement.
In the absence of anybody else saying anything, I think, rather reluctantly, I have to say, I'm going to move the recommendation. Is that seconded? Has anyone got any further comments on that? In that case, all those in favour of refusal? Anyone against? One. Okay. That is. Three abstentions. Right, we're on Rose Farm Cottage, Great Hutlow, agenda item 7. Yes. Councillor Martin Beer has left the room, having declared an interest. And I presume, John, you're taking this one again, are you?
Yes, it is, Chair. So this is a full planning application for the proposed demolition of a redundant building and redevelopment to form a single dwelling at Rose Farm Cottage, Grimgrove. The application site is on the screen, edged in red. It lies within a farmstead setting within the very small hamlet of Grimgrove, which lies to the southeast.
Mike, yours,
yeah.
and John, yours
I think it's because it was on.
Oh, sorry. Am I allowed to speak?
No, you're fine there.
Hello, my name is Karen.
No, excuse me.
Yet, sorry.
Can I start to speak?
No, not yet.
All right, tell me when I can then.
Just to help you a little bit, the process is that we listen to what the planning officer
Right,
is saying, and he shows us some photographs and so forth. And then we give the opportunity for the speakers each to speak in turn. and then we start a discussion about whether to permit it or not. So you're very welcome to stay where you are now, but I'd be grateful if you'd make sure your microphone is turned off. Thank you very much. And you can listen to what Mr. Keeley has to say, and then I think you are the first speaker, so you'll be able to speak then. Okay, John,
Okay.
would you like to start again, John?
I will do, yes, thank you, Chair. So, the application site is within the small hamlet of Grindlow and within the farmstead of the Rose Farm complex. Grindlow's a small hamlet which lies to the southeast of Great Hucklow village, you see here, which is the largest settlement to the northwest. It's also within the Great Hucklow and Grindlow conservation area. I'll move into the next slide to show more detail. So this is the majority of the hamlet is encapsulated within this slide. You've got the main farmhouse and attached holiday accommodation and more modern buildings, some of which have been repurposed for business premises to the east there. The driveway from the main lane into the farmyard, and this is the application building, and also encapsulates a walled enclosure to the rear there. So this is looking up from the road. You've got the existing main farmhouse to the left. This is the application barn, and these are the more modern buildings which are outside the application site. As I say, they've been repurposed as part of farm diversification. And looking back with those modern buildings behind us, this is the application building. It's a traditional limestone barn. It is you can see here, fairly poor repair with missing doors, corrugated roof, and is in a state of some disrepair. And there's more clearer photograph there, showing the character. It's obviously been subject to a number of alterations and repurposing over many years, which is understood to have started out life as a dwelling and then was changed to agricultural use in later years, and has changed in form over those years as well. There's a few more slides showing the detail. And we saw on site, looking through the main door there is some evidence of fireplaces, which obviously shows its former use as residential accommodation in the quite distant past now. So that's the existing layout of the building at the top there. There's sort of three main sections. And this is the proposal. So the proposal is to completely demolish that former building, which we do regard to be a non-designated heritage asset because of its history and use of traditional materials and style, etc. There is a structural report which talks about the possibility of its conversion, and the proposal is to convert it to a 3-bedroomed market dwelling. Sorry, not convert it, demolish it and build in its place a 3-bedroomed market dwelling with the rear garden here and 2 parking spaces to the side. The structural report, in terms of losing the building, the structural report somewhat sits on the fence. First of all, it says that the building could be converted, but then went on to raise a whole series of issues and problems which normally occur in conversions. But nevertheless, it did say it could be converted. But the clear preference of the applicant is to clear away that building and construct a modern dwelling in its place, which they believe would enhance. So leading on, just a little bit more detail of the layout. It would front that shared driveway, small terraced area to the rear, slightly raised garden area and parking to the side, and this on the roof here is solar panels which would contribute to the sustainability of the proposed new dwelling. This is the footprint of the existing building, and as proposed you can just see the outline. So the new dwelling would sit on the footprint of the existing building and would have that rear projection into the rear yard area. Fairly conventional layout. The key thing to note here is it is a very long frontage, you'll see in the elevation. Upstairs there's less accommodation as existing, and as proposed you've got the three bedrooms. So elevationally, that's the existing building we saw in the photographs. As initially proposed, which has been amended now, this is the amended plan. It has a 16-metre long frontage, which the agent recognised was over long for a Peak District dwelling, and therefore this design attempts to remedy that somewhat by giving the appearance of almost like a pair of farm cottages, despite it being one market dwelling. The materials would be natural limestone walling, gritstone detailing to the coins and the surrounds to the windows, under a blue slate roof. From the rear, existing, and the ground would be taken away, and that would be the proposed rear elevation with the rear off shop, the solar panels there. So traditional detailing, high solid to void ratio, and the gable elevation as existing. This is looking up the drive from the main road, and as initially proposed, which is the same as the amended plan. There's no change to that as far as I can see. Again, traditional detailing, width of gable, and then the other elevation as proposed. And that's just a cross section of the existing, showing internally those fireplaces that we saw on site that are evidenced in the wall, and then the proposed section. I'll just leave on that slide. So in summary, effectively this application treats the application site as a development plot. It seeks to completely clear away the heritage asset and construct what is in effect a large 3-bedroom market house. Our policy HC1, housing policy, doesn't allow for new market dwellings except in very exceptional circumstances where it's required to achieve conservation or enhancement of a valued vernacular or listed building, or to achieve enhancement in settlements, a DS1 settlement. This isn't such a settlement, it's a small hamlet. And as the scheme results in the total loss of the heritage asset, it doesn't bring any conservation or enhancement. Yes, you can argue it tidies up the site and presents a neat and tidy dwelling, but that's a market dwelling. It doesn't contribute to any of our other purposes, and the harm from the loss of the heritage asset is not outweighed by that tidying up, in our view. And therefore, as there is no significant overall benefit to the national park, it wouldn't accord with our policy GSP2 or our housing policies. Obviously, there's no concerns about archaeological, ecological or highway matters, but on the key housing and conservation issues, Chairman, the officer recommendation is one of refusal in this case.
Thank you very much. Now, we do have 3 speakers, and the first name I have down is Carol Bradshaw, so that must be you, madam. You have 3 minutes in which to address us, and when you're ready, please start, press the button and start when you're ready. Thank you very much.
Right. My name is Carol Bradshaw, and I have been a councillor on the Grinlow, Great Hucklow, Little Hucklow, Windmill, Copperdale and Hazelbadge Parish Council for over 20 years. I have been requested to make this statement on behalf of the Parish Council, who are unanimously in favour of this proposal. It should be noted that the Parish Council includes both Great Hucklow, Grinlow, and this is reflective of how the two are connected socially, with residents of both villages considering themselves to be part of the same community. The physical distance between the villages is also small, inaccurately described as 450 metres by the report, whereas in practice the distance between the closest property boundaries is less than 100 metres, and this is recognised by both villages as being part of the same conservation area. We are therefore of the view that applications in Grinlow should be considered to be within the designated village. We note the contents of the officer's report, much of which is highly technical. There has been insufficient time for us to provide a point-by-point response to the conclusions reached. particularly where the wording of the national policy documents has been used to justify the recommendation to reject the application. A view which takes into account the wider context of the policy wording could well have resulted in quite different conclusions. It's almost as if the decision was made firstly and then the national and park policies scoured to find ways to which to justify. The property is described as non-designated heritage asset. Stripping away the planner's jargon, what this actually means is that it is insufficient historical interest for it to be brought into the scope of any statutory protection, and no public funds are available to help to look after it. The officer's report in front of the committee today is too mealy-mouthed to say it clearly, but refusal of consent for the proposal will inevitably, eventually, lead to the complete collapse of the building and total loss of asset. In this context, the officer's recommendation for refusal puts them in nonsensical position of recommending a course of action which will result in the exact opposite of what they are trying to achieve. In these circumstances, both the National Planning Policy Framework and the National Parks' own development management policies call for balanced judgment. Making such judgment is a key function of the Planning Committee, and despite the impression given in the reports that the guidance provided by the National Planning Policy Framework should lead to the proposal being refused, the true situation is much more finely balanced. The Council therefore urges committee members to exercise their judgment in favour of the proposed development. Am I allowed to give my own personal opinion? That was the Council.
All right, well, your 3 minutes are now up, I'm afraid.
So I'm not allowed to say anything else?
I think I must be fairly strict in discipline on this, I'm afraid.
Right. I'll leave this letter for you to read later on. It's only my personal opinion, which is...
I suspect they're not much different from what you've just said. So
no, it's a different issue. It's a different
okay,
prospect.
well, I'm going to, if I may, say, ask you to take your seat and let the next speaker speak, if I can. Nick, are you going next, or your client?
I think it's okay, the client will just introduce themselves and then I'll finish things off if that's okay.
Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you all for being here to discuss our application. My name is Leila Renshaw. I'm here with Sarah, my wife. I'm from Grindle and grew up on the farm where this building lies. Through my lifetime and a long time before, the building has been largely disused and in a very poor state. Sarah and I began looking at this over 2 years ago with a view to convert it into our home, where we hope to live long term and raise a family close to both of our own families, in the community we both know and love, having always lived in the area, in fact meeting at Great Hucklow School. We had hoped that it'd be a relatively straightforward project, given the previous permission for renovation to holiday accommodation that was approved in 2009, and we would be able to produce a home in keeping with the local area. However, didn't expect to find the structure of the building had deteriorated so far as it has when the structural report was completed. The safety and financial implications this caused have led us, with the support of Nick, our agent, to the current plan that's being discussed today, to the current plan of rebuilding that's being discussed today, as this is the only way we'll be able to progress with turning what currently stands as an empty and deteriorating building into a family home. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And
So I'll just jump straight in.
when you're ready,
Bought a little
take your time. You've just turned it off.
Sorry. Technology. Non-designated heritage assets. Only Fools and Horses coined it beautifully with Trigger's 20-year-old broom. This building is the metaphoric broom. It's had 17 new handles and 14 new heads. Nonetheless, it's a heritage asset. But it now needs another new handle and a new head at the same time. Despite setting out to save the broom once more, the implications of staying on that path have proved unmanageable. We believe now it's justifiable to throw the old broom away and move forward, because the existing broom simply isn't worth keeping. It's old, yes, and therefore has heritage, but its loss will not impact the cultural heritage of Peckham High Street road sweepers.
The book strategically propped in front of me represents a study of field barns and traditional vernacular structures. The contents illustrate a study of what is absolutely the crux of our cultural heritage in the open countryside of the National Park. They're significant in every way. They are built for purpose, they are magnificent, they are beautiful. Quite frankly, I would hope the National Park would feel embarrassed to suggest the application building comes anywhere near that standard. Structural report. The structural report submitted with this is in fact one of the best and most honest reports I've read in recent years. It assesses that it can be saved. The building will need completely underpinning and an exoskeleton of scaffold built around it to hold it up and safeguard operatives while the underpinning is carried out. Only then could work start to secure the walls, and again the advice is that large sections will have to be taken down and rebuilt because the mortar bed is unquantifiable. So yes, let me be clear, it can be saved. But it is not worth the effort. The report is in fact a second draft. The first included a statement from the engineer that read, "Why would anyone invest that much in a building of this quality?" I asked him to remove that because I feared it would look like I was putting words in his mouth. DS1 settlements. The officer's report also looks at the DS1 settlement and concludes Grindlow is not within one. Whilst that is a binary policy decision and that can't be argued, I am mindful that it is also based on old thinking first put in place in the 1990s for the structure plan. And whilst everything else in terms of policy has moved on, that binary approach of in settlement good, out of settlement bad has not. The fact is, this site is not in the open countryside as Sheila Hine would have it. It's in a developed area surrounded by residential properties. Replacing a dilapidated structure with a new sustainable one designed with the authority's guidance in mind should not be precluded on that binary basis. Yorkshire National Parks don't do it. Sites are considered on their merits. I've got one short paragraph if I may.
Very quickly, please.
To resist the proposal because on paper it is labelled a non-designated heritage asset is to grossly misunderstand the nuance of heritage and how it contributes or not in its environment. And to resist development because a paragraph in policy says it's not in a settlement is being unnecessarily prescriptive. There is true, deliverable, sustainable good in the proposal, despite what the officer's report says. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Well, members, we did a visit yesterday. I think we've just discussed a corrugated iron barn in Hathersage. At one level, every building has a heritage, and one must always recognise that. And it seems to me that the issue here, there are two issues here. The first is whether the heritage value of this building is worth fighting for, to the extent of risking whether it would continue in existence at all. And the second one is whether, and it's the point which Mrs. Bradshaw, I think, was trying to make, was whether whether the environmental gain that would be achieved by building this replacement house is sufficient to override whatever heritage value is left in the barn as it is now. But what I am not getting from what I'm hearing so far is a clear understanding of what the heritage value is of the building beyond the fact that it has a date. And I wonder whether we could try and understand that before we move any further.
A question to me, I assume, Chair.
Well, I need somebody to advise us. Whoever is here to advise us on that subject.
Right. I could only refer you back into the description in the report, which I'm just trying to find the relevant section. So just bear with me.
Which one are we in?
Yeah, sorry. Yes, it's paragraph 51 on page 44 of your agenda pack. It says that the building is considered to possess sufficient historic interest to be deemed a non-designated heritage asset. And this is a conclusion shared by the submitted heritage report, not just ourselves. And that's also supported by our own conservation officer. It goes on to discuss the repair, and notwithstanding that, it has a strong degree of historic interest, representing either an L-plan or a two-unit cottage dating from the mid-18th century, and that the survival of this building helps to contribute to these typologies of houses from this period. Then it discusses whether it had originally designed as a single dwelling or farm workers' cottages. And the historic interest contributes to both the property itself, the wider farm complex, and the Great Hucklow and Grindlow conservation area. And it does acknowledge that it's changed over time, as well you say.
And I mean, we noted on site yesterday, for example, that there was a complete floor missing at one point. I mean, if you're going to convert this back into a house, you've got a huge amount of rebuild, haven't you?
Yes, the structural report sets out all the issues.
Yeah.
But that's not uncommon.
The structural report will primarily deal with keeping the thing up and whether it'll stay up. But to make it occupiable, you're going to have to put a substantial amount of rebuild because otherwise there's nothing there to occupy.
Well, the scheme before us isn't a conversion, so we don't have a scheme setting out exactly what would be required to be rebuilt.
Sorry, what we're trying to do...
How much fabric would be able to be saved.
Yes, but what we're trying to establish is at least what I'm trying to establish, is whether the extent of, whether the state of the building as it is, and the fairly low evidence of features of real interest worth preserving. There is some interest, I get that. And the amount of rebuilding altogether make a sufficient case for saying that this is a building which is so important that we can't possibly sanction anything in its place. Do you understand the question I'm trying to get to grips with?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's the crux of the case, and it's for members to make that judgment on what they consider the merits of the building and the proposal.
And so there is that balance to be thought through, and against that, there is the potential, because it's an eyesore at the moment, and it's got a monopitch roof, it's got half of it missing, it's got nothing very special on the outside in relation to its stonework or anything of that sort. The other question is whether the environmental gain to be achieved by replacing it will be an enhancement worth achieving. And then we come to Mrs. Chadwick's question about what is the built-up area, the settlement area of Great Hucklow. I lived in Great Hucklow for 5.5 years, and I don't think I ever thought that Grindlow was somewhere different from Great Hucklow over that time, and I would have gone occasionally to the Ollerenshaw farm and picked up eggs and things. But this is a built-up area where an environmental improvement could be achieved. And I mean, you could argue it both ways. You can say, look, this is part of the built-up area, and therefore we'll try and achieve the improvement. Or you can say this is not part of the environmental, the built-up area, and we'll just leave the building to rot because nobody will particularly want to invest in it. And I'm struggling with those sort of arguments. Sorry, I'm holding the fort. Who has anything to say? Bill.
It's me again, but only a few of us attended the site visit, so I did. So on the number of plus points is that it's I think it's effectively part of the built-up environment by any sort of interpretation. you know, there is a gap with Great Hucklow perhaps, but it's certainly a development on this site would be appropriate and would, you know, help the environment there. I understand that that there could well be a collapse of the property without any intervention. That is the likely outcome over a number of years. I like the provision of what I'm hearing is a primary residential use. Our villages need to be viable, sustainable and vibrant. And also I understood that it would be a family home for local people as well. And I also understand that the building can be saved, but probably at an enormous cost and difficulty. And I'm struck by why would anyone invest that much in a building of that quality? I think we've still got to debate the quality of the building, but that is something in our mind, must be in our minds. I'm also conscious that, having said all those things, I'm very keen on local needs housing, and this sounds like it could well provide for that. But you know, I wouldn't want to see this converted into a holiday let, you know, the day after it's open. So and I understand there are difficulties with this, and I still don't fully understand whether that could be conditioned in any approval. Should we go to that? Because I do like the idea of a viable primary residential use in that position.
Yeah. I think the answer to that is not under present policy.
Yeah. So
Is that right?
So. Yeah, so is that so? At some point, should we be changing that policy and not? I know there's a local plan, but that will take a number of years. But I think the issue of local needs housing and holiday lets and so on is actually quite critical at the moment. You know, we're reaching a tipping point. So we as an authority need to address that sooner rather than later and not wait for the outcome of a local plan.
Right. Andrew Hart and then Ken Smith.
Yeah, Chair, this is obviously, it's one of those, and we've all seen them, any of us who've been on this authority for a long time, will have seen properties that have had various lives. They may have started out as an agricultural building back 300-400 years ago, and then they get converted to be residential before the park existed, and then they end up going back to being agricultural buildings. So this property's had quite probably an eventful life, if anything. But there comes a point where conversion is not an option because of the cost. That it's sometimes better to start again. It's gone through those lives. It's had in recent times quite a hard one by the look of it. But I have seen worse buildings rebuilt and converted than this one. So I'm in really split mind about this. Whether it does have some merit for a new life in a different guise, perhaps. And we're all conscious about trying to keep villages going. And with it having had previous residential use, I'm wondering whether this would contribute to the enhancement of the village. Because in many of those cases, some villages are very, very close together. They're not really separate villages, they're really quite more or less one. So I'd like to hear some more comments from members of the committee.
All right, well, you're going to get them now because Ken's going to give them.
Thank you, Chair. Just going back to your initial inquiry about what's the heritage interest in the property, and to an extent I'll repeat what John said, but very briefly, in referring to the applicant's own heritage statement that says the building has a strong degree of historic interest. But I think also paragraph 52 in the report is useful as well, because I don't buy into the analogy of the new broom, new handle, all the rest of it. It's the existing building that has been changed over time. And as the heritage statement from the applicant also says, that the very fact that the building has been adapted over time from being a cottage to a farm out building further contributes to the historic interest of the building. And I think it's those kinds of things, the fact that the openings and the blocked openings that can be seen on the front elevation, the vertical joints between elements that have been added over time, that's all part of the heritage interest. And I think it's ironic in some respects, given the number of derelict barns, as Andrew has said, some even in worse condition than this, that have come before this committee over time, and members have been quite adamant that we should be saving our barns through conversion. Yet here we are with an application that is going to remove completely 3 elements, conjoined elements, to replace with a completely new building, which I think is completely inappropriate, frankly. Again, we heard in the previous application issues about embedded energy in existing buildings, and yet here again we're going to sweep away the embedded energy that is embodied in the existing and replace it with the energy-hungry new materials that would have to be used. I don't dispute that some energy-hungry materials would have to be used in the refurbishment of this complex, but I suspect, I have no evidence because there's nothing before us, that it will be less than a complete removal, which uses energy, and rebuild and new build, which uses a lot of energy. I think we must also bear in mind it's not a local needs dwelling. It's a market dwelling. It's open market. It isn't addressing any kind of local need per se. It is being reserved as open market for all the implications that has. I don't see before us any convincing evidence, because the structural report is, in my opinion, it dances around the issues of quite what the structural integrity of the existing buildings might be. It doesn't indicate quite what would need to be taken down, and I acknowledge that sometimes that can only be identified as a building is being worked on. But that shouldn't mean that we automatically go for demolition and replacement because of that. I acknowledge that there are additional costs involved, but I don't think that that should be our consideration. What we have to determine is whether or not complete demolition and replacement with something new is the most appropriate way forward. And frankly, Chair, I don't think that to be the case.
Any other members wish to contribute? Jean.
Has it come on? Yeah. I'm sorry, Chairman. I think we're beating around the bush here a little bit. I don't know what the thoughts are of other members here because they haven't said what it is. I've took on all the heritage aspects that's been said. It said it's going to be too expensive to rebuild. It's going to fall down. There is a use there. It can be used for somebody in the village. I can't support refusal of this. I'm sorry. So I'd like to move approval.
You're going to move approval. Is that seconded? But before we go any further with that, we may want to comment, but we also need some idea of what conditions might be put on.
Yes, just to answer Brian's point, those points have been covered, Brian, with the clarification that it is actually for a market dwelling, although in the first occupants are local people we hear. Yes, if members were to approve it, the sort of conditions that we'd expect to see are obviously the standard time for commencement of development, condition covering the adoption of the approved plan numbers, covering the minor design clarifications, agreeing details such as windows and doors joinery, agreeing a sample panel of materials, a sample roof material, an archaeological building recording condition to record what's there before it is lost, a condition to pick up Natural England's comments about the package treatment plant and its performance, the highway conditions and the preservation of the 2 parking spaces in addition, ecological mitigation, and I did debate whether or not you would want to see the withdrawal of permitted development rights, although the site is very well constrained, and I'll leave you to debate whether you think that would be necessary. I think in this case, probably not.
Those are the conditions. Did you say you wanted to speak? No, that's fine. Okay. Any other members got any thoughts on this matter? No, in that case, I'm going to put it to the vote because it's been proposed and seconded. You're on those conditions, proposed and seconded, happy with those? All those in favour of permitting it? 8? Is that what it was? 9. 9. Those against? 2. That is permitted. Thank you. I'm going to, in my own interest, if nobody else's, ask for a break. We're moving on to North Lees Barn. Should we make it, is 5 minutes enough? 5 minutes?
Ken says no.
No, 10 minutes. All right, 10 minutes, that's fine. time we said, but I think everybody is here. Is everybody here? So I think we will recommence at 22 minutes past, and the report is being presented by
myself, Chair.
yourself. Right, okay.
Thank you. Beforehand, Brian would just like to say a few words.
Thank you, members. Yeah, I just thought it'd be helpful if I just offered a little bit of guidance at this point, because we've got two items to come, both submitted by the National Park Authority itself. Angela Edwards, our solicitor, has already written to you and referred to this idea of putting a different hat on in the different committees that you are part of and as in your role as National Park members. That's really to highlight the need to come into this arena with a different mindset, because what you can't do is consider the interest of the National Park Authority itself here in your role, of its objectives, and in the way that the authority might want to consider its budget, so those kind of things in the development of its assets. So you are the planning committee for the Peak District National Park at this time, and it's your job to look at the material planning matters about the place and its buildings, and how we apply our statutory purposes through those and through our adopted planning policies. So we can only look at the development in front of us at this time, and not any wider context, or what any organisation might want to do in the future with those buildings or assets, which would just be speculative at this point in time. So because of that, we have to look at the way that we approach every application and any organisation, really to achieve consistency and fairness in every application that we consider. So on that basis, I'll pass to John. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. This is a listed building consent application for alterations to listed barn comprising roof covering renewal, repairs to timber roof structure, minor repointing to internal stonework. And the proposed roof covering renewal includes relaying the main roof and replacing sections of concrete hard road tiles with natural stone slates. Leadwork renewal and the replacement of an existing bitumen felt with a breathable membrane. And the application site is North Lees Barn, outlined in red there on the slide behind me. North Lees Barn is a Grade 2 listed Crook frame barn, which is part of the North Lees Hall and Farmhouse complex of buildings there. We have obviously the application site outlined in red. I don't really see the pointer there. North Lees Hall to the south, which is a Grade 2 star listed building, individually listed Grade 2 farmhouse alongside, and Grade 2 listed outbuildings to the rear. The site lies in the open countryside to the north of Hathersage. As many members know, it's on the rising hillside leading up to Stanage Edge, which is off to the northeast of this slide. It's accessed up the steep driveway from Burley Lane, which rises up. It also carries a public right-of-way, a very popular public right-of-way which passes the site on its way up to the iconic Stanage Edge. Just to the bottom of the slide there is the North Lees campsite there, and just north of the barn itself, the application site, is a modern farm shed which is used by the tenant farmer. Just moving to the next slide. And you can see it's a very long barn. It's 48 metres long. The 4 crook frames, which lie in this northwestern section, and the barn has been described in the Heritage Report as a multi-phase barn with later 18th and 19th century elements towards the southeastern end, and we'll see that in the photographs. So this is the southeastern end, the later end. You see the stone construction, the stone slates. What you don't quite see is some of the poor lead work and cement flaunching that's been used in these areas, which is proposed to be replaced. Whoops, going the wrong way. That's the back corner of that, and this is part of, again, shows some of the detail of the barn. And then the main the 4 crook-framed elements are within this section here, which is the earliest section of the building. And you can begin to see also the roof here. You can see it dips and shows how it's in quite poor condition and is in real need of urgent repair works because water is getting in through the top and causing some damage to the very fine timber roof structure within the building itself. So the back of the building shows again views of the roof, stone slates. And as you pan right, these are the 2 elements of hard row concrete tiles, which as part of the re-roofing works will be replaced by matching stone tiles. You can see here the real strong dip from a cracked and failing ridge beam there. And there's another section of hard row tiles to the right. There are also some sections of later plastic guttering which will be replaced with cast iron along with the leadwork repairs. And as part of those repairs internally, there would be a need for some repointing of the stonework at the tops of the walls, alongside obviously the repair, ideally repair, but may possibly require replacement of some of the timber structures. Here's a slide showing the internal roof structure. This is where the cracked and failing ridge beam is, that's pulling away from its support and causing issues. You can also see the bituminous felt roof lining here, which is failing and peeling away to reveal the stone slates and the laths behind. That bituminous roofing felt was put in without consent, I should note at this stage. That's another view of the failing slate, and you just see the top of the crook frames, which are one of the most important features of this very impressive roof structure within this building, which is described by our conservation officers as being probably one of the most important agricultural buildings in the national park because of this age of its crook barn frame. And you can see here how the current unauthorised bitumen felt obscures all views of the underside of the stone slates, which would normally be one of the defining characteristics of the internal view of an agricultural building of this age, and contribute strongly to its significance. Let's move on to the existing layout plan. There's obviously no change to this. This is the ground floor. We carried out a site visit yesterday, and we stood in this end, which is open to the ceiling, and looked up at the first crook frame, and we saw the roof structure from that end, as well as looking around the rest of the building, and looked in the more modern 19th century end as well for comparison. The upper floor, again, there's no change to the floor layout. This just shows the position of those 4 crook frames and the roof plan, the proposed roof plan, which identifies in red here the areas where the lead flashing, lead valleys would be replaced, and the areas of concrete hard row which would be replaced as well. Elevation wise, this is the south facing elevation. There's no real change there other than obviously the flashing, which isn't really discernible in this photograph, and the rainwater repairs. But on the rear, obviously in red, those concrete tiles would be replaced by matching stone slates, and would provide obviously a significant enhancement to the character and appearance of the building. As proposed, obviously all one material, and with the structural repairs to the timber inside, a straight ridge line as well. Again, the 2 gable elevations, no real change discernible, other than obviously the improved flashing and verge detail. This slide shows the a number of things. Firstly, it shows the roof timber structure, and this is the beam I refer to, which has cracked and failing and pulling away and causing problems with weight being pushed onto the outside walls. And it also shows, so that'll need repair or replacement, and it shows the position of 2 new timber braces which are missing, which are part of the structural timber repairs within the roof. Since this report was drafted, based on the submitted back report, we have received an objection from our ecologist concerned about the impact of the proposed works on the known back roost. Now that back roost is located within this wall here and is both a summer roost and importantly a winter hibernation roost, meaning the works couldn't take place during those periods of time without harming the bats. Since that objection was raised, the applicant has had further discussions and provided further information for our ecologist, who's now satisfied that the works could go ahead, subject to conditions controlling when any works would take place. Essentially, those would need to take place outside of those sensitive areas where the bats are least vulnerable. So that would mean during the month of April or mid-September to the end of October, subject to conditions and the appropriate mitigation set out in the BAT report for both bats, breeding birds and barn owl. There are no further ecological objections to that side of things. Now, just turning to the more detail to the repair and renovation works to the structure. Obviously, repairing the building, making it weathertight, replacing the concrete tiles, and repairing the timber roof structure are all welcome works. They would enhance the significance of the building and are, of course, necessary and essential repairs at the moment because water is getting in and causing some damage. However, in addition to those welcome repair works, the applicant also wishes to take the opportunity to replace the existing bitumen roof membrane with a modern polymer breathable membrane whilst doing the re-roofing works. Nevertheless, that from our point of view, that does require, I've got a section here showing where that sits. So this is the existing roof with the crook frame, the rafters, and the existing bitumen frame is bitumen felt is shown in red here, which is then battened on top, and then the slates on top of that. The proposed replacement of that by the modern membrane would be in the same location. It would sit on top of the rafters. There would be battening, and because of the nature of that membrane, it would also require cross battening, which have a minor but nevertheless harmful impact of raising the roof at the same time. The more important issue, though, is the introduction of the membrane itself, which is a modern intervention into a building. It's not a traditional method of repair or renovation of buildings of this high significance. And the harmful impact of that introduction is set out in the report, but essentially arises from the following aspects. First, it's a modern and non-traditional method of repairing such buildings and making them weathertight on what is effectively a 17th century crook frame barn, instead of a traditional method of achieving the same aim through the use of a technique called torching, which is when you're bedding the tiles on, you use a lime mortar to give the weather protection to stop wind-driven rain getting into the building, whilst at the same time providing a traditional breathability to the building itself. You've also, secondly, you've got the harmful impact of covering up the underside of the slates. If you recall the slide looking up at the inside, so instead of seeing the wonderful stone slates from the underside, you would see a white plastic membrane effectively, which would be harmful both visually as well as covering up one of the significant aspects of a building of this type. There are also concerns about potential for unintended consequences in using a modern membrane over the top of the rafters, in potentially trapping moisture on the roof timbers and potentially causing further decay or damage unintended. All of these objections would be removed by the use of a traditional repair method, as I say, using the torching, which is a tried and tested method over many years to keep water out of a building of this type. Consequently, we've received very clear advice from our conservation officers that the introduction of this membrane is harmful, and that planning permission, listed building consent, I should say, should be refused, given the alternative, non-harmful method. So, turning to practice of dealing with listed building applications, the legislation in the Planning, Listed Buildings and Conservation Areas Act is very clear. It does require us to have special regard to the desirability of preserving the building, its siting, and the features of special architectural or historic interest it possesses. Now, of course, the roof of this crook frame barn is one of, if not the most important special feature of this building. And the National Planning Policy Framework in paragraph 205 advises that in dealing with such buildings that great weight should be given to the heritage asset's conservation, and the more important the asset, the greater that weight should be. It goes on to say that this is irrespective of whether any potential harm amounts to substantial harm, total loss, or as in this case, less than substantial harm to its significance. And it goes on to say that in para 206 that any harm or loss of significance should require clear and convincing justification. And the decision maker is required to weigh this harm against any public benefits which would arise from the proposal. So the very clear advice from our expert conservation officers is that the proposed breathable polymer membrane would cause harm, and this harm is not necessary given the alternative traditional method of weatherproofing the building through the use of torching. Given the traditional alternative is available, officers conclude there is no clear and convincing justification for the use of the modern membrane. In theory, whilst the weatherproofing and protection such a membrane would give and contribute to the conservation of the building, that could be a material and public benefit that you could place some weight on. But my advice to you is that you cannot place any weight or very little weight indeed to that, given the alternative of a traditional non-harming alternative. That traditional alternative removes also any harm and also removes any concern about the unintended consequences of the use of the polymer membrane, a view which is supported by the Society for Protection of Ancient Buildings, who support the views of our conservation officer in their representations. So therefore, in conclusion, my report determined that the harm was clearly not outweighed by any public benefits, and that great weight should be attached to the harm to the building, and I concluded that the recommendation should be one of refusal, Chair, in this case. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much. We will allow two officers to address us first. Who have we got? Right. Yes, two. Beth Fenner. Hello.
No, it's fine. I'll go first, Chair,
Are
if
you?
that's okay.
Sorry. Okay, Hannah, thank you.
Thank you.
We've never actually met, have we?
Only in
We haven't,
committees, I
sorry.
think. Only in committees. But no,
Okay.
thank you and good morning, everybody.
Okay.
I'm speaking as Head of Service for the Assets team at the Authority. There is a vision for the North Lees estate that will be supported by a new estate management plan and an HLF bid. Consultation with all key stakeholders regarding the estate plan and the HLF will be undertaken, and working in partnership will be a priority when addressing the needs of the estate, the National Park and its stakeholders. The existing estate management plan expires next year. The vision is to create a range of accommodation types across the estate that provides an inclusive, wheelchair accessible accommodation model across a broad affordability bracket. This would maximise market appeal and would expand the existing offering of the campsite and the holiday cottage accommodation to also include the hall, the farmhouse and the Crook Barn. The development of this vision would be worked up in the HLF bid in 2025 with an aspiration of securing funding to deliver these projects. The North Lees vision aims to deliver the National Park Management Plan purposes of supporting communities, climate change and access to nature, whilst maintaining and showcasing our heritage assets for all to enjoy. The vision would ensure the estate could also operate with financial resilience. Failure to utilise the revenue opportunities that present themselves across the estate could directly implicate the National Park's ability to retain this jewel in our crown and could lead to disposals. The Crook Barn plays an integral role in the viability and future of the estate. Detailed accommodation designs will be prepared and subsequently funded by the development phase of the HLF. At this stage, we are seeking approval to renew the roof covering of the Crook Barn on the basis the building will be adequate for future occupation. The use of a breathable membrane will ensure this and will allow thermal performance upgrades of the building, consequently reducing the building's own carbon emissions. It is essential that any development of the property is able to demonstrate energy efficiency improvements that are sympathetic to its heritage value. However, we must recognise that some compromise will be required. We feel that the inclusion of a membrane is a relatively small impact on the character of the property that will be outweighed by significant benefits that deliver a standard of energy efficiency that, as an authority, we have already committed to through our National Park Management Plan. Significant consideration, research and technical expertise have been applied to our proposal, and we are sympathetic to the cultural importance of the Crook Barn. To be in a position to maintain and retain this asset for future generations, we must seek to ensure we balance the interests and importance of heritage alongside climate change, accessibility, affordability and financial security. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Beth Fenner.
Hello, thank you. I'm speaking on behalf of our in-house team of experienced chartered building surveyors at the authority. Our role includes developing detailed technical specifications for historic buildings across the Peak Park. This requires us to have an in-depth understanding of how materials in historic buildings work together and how best to protect our historic structures. Only a small extract of our supplementary document was included in the Planning Officer's report. Therefore, we do feel the need to clarify some of the statements made. The conservation response says that roofing membranes can trap moisture and inhibit drying. We are proposing a breathable membrane, a material which is commonly used in historic buildings and is recommended in Historic England's latest guidance. The condensation analyses provided in our supplementary document simulates the exact roof build-up of Crook Barn. The results scientifically prove that a breathable membrane would assist drying and ensure moisture escapes. The conservation response also states that insulation can be retrofitted to a roof without a membrane. The condensation analyses we provided show that without a membrane, a dew point will form within the roof structure, putting the roof timbers at risk of decay. These condensation calculations, put together by industry experts, have not been acknowledged by the planning or conservation officers.
So, I'm sorry to stop you, and I'm please forget the time for the moment because it's more important that we get this right. Would you just take me through that again very slowly, that last point, so that I really understand it? Because I'm not sure that I got it.
So the condensation analysis is basically the key calculation that you do to determine whether a roof build-up meets the requirements it needs to meet in terms of preventing any condensation build-up and therefore preventing any decay to timbers. It's the method that is used to prove that to building control, for example. We've had that undertaken using the specific build-up of Crook Barn, so the depths of the rafters in the building, the thickness of the slate, everything to simulate that environment. we've done it to show with and without the membrane, and the results, as shown in the supplementary document, show that the breather membrane has no condensation risk, but without the breather membrane it does. Is that helpful? Sorry.
I'm hoping so. Carry on with
Thank
your
you.
statement. We'll may have to come back to that.
No, that's not a problem. It should be noted that the Society for Protection of Ancient Buildings representation statement acknowledges breather membranes can be appropriate and asks for justification. The condensation risk analysis results we provided provide such justification. The conservation officers state that torching is compatible with roof insulation. We understand from the conservation officer that this advice has arisen from 2 local roofers and 1 architect from Hereford, Christian Montes. Our supplementary document, which is supported by English Heritage Guidance, outlines why torching and pitched roof insulation are incompatible in the case of Crook Barn. This is due to the need to manage moisture, achieve acceptable levels of insulation without obscuring the crooks, and the need for torching to remain unobscured for inspection and repair. Having spoken with Mr. Montes, he was not able to offer any solution to the issue of maintenance and has confirmed there is no supporting technical guidance for this. All guidance documents available, Historic England guidance, NHBC guidance and building regulations support the use of a breathable membrane when insulating at raft level. The condensation analysis we provided scientifically evidences this. Torching in conjunction with pitched roof insulation is not supported by any technical guidance, is an untested experimental practice and has no proven long-term performance. I have 1 sentence.
No,
but
please do.
thank
It's
you.
more important we get
It's
this right.
just concluding that if the roof is to be insulated in future, a breathable membrane is absolutely necessary. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right. I suspect you might comfortably sit there because I think there may be...
I might, yeah.
Because I think questions may come up,
together,
and
if that's okay.
I don't know if there's a conservation officer present who can deal with things as well. I don't know, but hello. This is not quite a normal situation in terms of receiving advice, so we'll deal with it that way. Can I just before I'm sorry, I'm going to talk rather a lot shortly, members, and I do apologise. Oh, could you turn your thing off? Sorry. But before we get going, can I be absolutely clear? What is there an urgency about this, and what is that urgency?
If I might answer that. So the roof is in a significant state of disrepair, as we can see on the photos. It's sited along a footpath, so there are health and safety implications of having that near the public. It's unstable. We have a ridge beam that is only just sitting in the position that it needs to sit at. The only way to fix that is to remove the slates and recover the roof because of the weight of the slates. So there is certainly an urgency in the need for repair. In addition to that, if I might add, we realise we have, important timber structures in there which we want to preserve. We feel like without repairing, by recovering this roof, there is a risk that those are going to suffer further decay, and we might not be able to repair what we can now if we leave it any further.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
Right. We've been told by officers very clearly, twice over, that we have to concentrate on the specific issue that this application raises, on the basis, of course, that we treat it the same way as we should treat an application by a private individual. That is the starting point. We'll have to see as we go along as to whether we can stick to that or not, but let's start there for the moment. I would like to understand, first of all, the ground rules that we're working to. The report tells us that the Listed Buildings Act, here we are, paragraph 55, the report tells us that our job here is to have special regard in dealing with a listed building application. I'm using my words very carefully. In dealing with a listed building application, we have to have special regard to the desirability of preserving the building. That is the, as I'm getting it, the legal test that we have to apply. What is slightly confusing me here is that normally when we get an application like this, we have two applications. The first is a listed building application, and the second is an application for planning permission. And the reason for that is because, as I understand it, is because the Listed Buildings Act gives us just one test, which is the desirability of preserving the building. The need for planning permission arises because the proposals in front of us at the time involve development. Now, we haven't got development here. We've simply got a repair job. It's a big repair job and it's a complicated repair job, but we've simply got a repair job. So there's no development. And if there's no development, then one of the things we have to be very, very careful about is not applying the tests to this that you would apply to development affecting a listed building. So if, for example, and you must put me right if I'm wrong, if, for example, this was a process of restoration or a change of use or an extension or a remodelling, those would all be development. And in the process of carrying out that development, we would be altering the listed building. And then we would need listed building consent. But we're not carrying out development. We're only repairing the building. So when, for example, it seems to me, we come to the reasons that a refusal that are set down, and it refers to the works being contrary to policies L3, DMC5 and DMC7 and the National Planning Policy Framework. All of those policies are dealing with what happens if development involving a listed building is involved. There is no development that I can see here. We've been told that there's no development. We've been told that this is just for repairs. So those tests and the policies that are set out in this report, it seems to me, are not the tests that we should be applying. And my perception of this is that the only issue we have in front of us to begin with, and please, those of you who are hoping that this is going in a particular direction, I don't know whether it's going to end up there or not, the only test we have in front of us is whether, in replacing the bitumen liner for the plastic liner, we are preserving the building. Has anybody got any quarrels with that as an argument?
One thing.
I mean, I'm going to go on, but you, yeah.
Just that the paragraph you're referring to also refers to features of architectural interest as well, so it's the building and those wider things.
And preserving the features.
Yeah.
But what we are doing there, and I missed out a sentence, sorry, I had a very bad night's sleep last night. What we're doing there is judging this against the building as it was when it was listed in 1967, or any subsequent approval for listed building consent. We're not judging it against something else that may have happened. So that test is still the same test. Can I, unless you've got a question, Ken? Yes.
And it's a detailed one, I'm afraid, but it's not unusual for various acts to have definitions of words, and I just wondered whether in the appropriate act there is a definition of what preservation or preserving actually is.
There we are, one for you. Okay. So, on paper at least, the test that seems to me that we are applying is whether by replacing one membrane with the other, we are preserving the building, damaging the building, or possibly improving the building. And if we conclude on the argument so far that merely replacing one membrane with another membrane is not doing anything other than preserving the building, that seems to me to be possibly the end of the argument. I had more to say, but that seems to me where we stop. And I'm not quite sure in terms of the planning application where we proceed from there. The only proviso I have to that is that we have been told in the report that on different dates, I have the 1980s and I have the 1990s, which I think we had on site yesterday, that at some point we are told this membrane was inserted without listed building consent. Now, that's a serious accusation in itself because it's a criminal offence. But what I'm missing in that is that if this was a private application, the onus on proving that it was inserted without listed building consent would fall on us. And I don't see, and indeed if you were to prosecute for altering this building without listed building consent, the standard of proof would be beyond all reasonable doubt. And I don't see in this report that that case has been made out. And I'm left with the belief that if we are to apply the test that Brian laid us down, that our obligation, probably if this was a private application, is to approve what we have in front of us, because all we have is a report saying we are swapping one membrane for another. I don't believe that to be a satisfactory answer, by the way, but I can't see what other answer we can give. But I have other things to say in due course, but I'm very happy to hear what you have to say.
Can I come back on just a couple of the points that you raised, Chair? The first was about applying policies. Now, you're correct that the starting point is the legislation and the weight we have to give to preserving the listed building. And in discharging that duty to carry out that function, the policies help us in coming to the judgment as whether that's achieved. So they are relevant, both the National Planning Policy Framework and our own local policies, which reflect the national policies. On the second issue I want to come back on is on the membrane, the bitumen felt membrane that's in at the moment. That is unauthorised. There's been no contention with the applicant that that's wrong. It's unfortunate, yes, but the starting point is that you can't put any great weight on that. That shouldn't be there. So in effect, the application is inserting a new membrane rather than it is in effect replacing one. But in terms of the weight you give, you are looking at the insertion of a new membrane rather than the swapping of an unauthorised one for an authorised one.
But if that membrane was inserted before 1967, it wouldn't have required listed building consent.
That is correct.
Yes, and we have no evidence to the contrary. You see, once you trap yourself into saying we must apply the same tests to ourselves as we apply to a private person, you end up in that particular cul-de-sac. I'm not saying that the answer is satisfactory, but I don't see what other answer is available. And with the greatest respect, planning policies which apply to development are not relevant in this particular case, because all we are doing is repairing what's there now. And I can't see how those can be made to apply.
Yeah, I just want to make a point on that. There is some case law fairly recently, which Angela forwarded to us, and a part of that judgment, the judge said that a decision maker in applying the policies, the paragraphs in the MPPF correctly, will be discharging their duty under the Listed Building and Conservation Area Act. So applying those policies, those paragraphs in the MPPF is what we're required to do, in effect, to discharge our duty. And that was in a recent judgment.
Well, I would like notice of that. You see, I'm floundering here because I think that we're getting into difficulties. Can I move on and then I'll throw it over to debate? I have to say I would have some difficulty. And here I am moving off-piste into areas that I've been warned to stay off, but I want to get this right rather than anything else. If I am right in what I've said, our obligation is to approve these membranes. I have to say that it seems to me that there is, and I'm using my words carefully, a degree of justification for the concern that the conservation officers have raised. The idea that a building of this status and stature and indeed age, with some amazing crook barns and everything else, should be entirely swathed, as it were, in plastic, without any ability to read and understand the structure and shape of the building as it had been, and for the whole of the roof to be encased in plastic, is one that I have some difficulty with, and I would not personally feel the least bit comfortable with that. I note that in the previous report that went to the P&R committee, or whatever it was called in those days, setting out the vision for this area of our ownership, that we claim to put forward as our objective for this building, for this estate, the highest possible conservation objectives. And I have to question in my own mind, or at least let's put it this way around. At 3 o'clock this morning, I woke up and questioned in my own mind whether, if this was to be approved, we would be achieving our highest conservation objectives. And for that reason, I would find it very, very difficult either to approve or refuse this application as it now stands, because I do think this has to be thought through more clearly. Against that, we are faced with the question of urgency, which has been described to us. I'm going to guess that there are some bits that are more urgent than other bits. I don't know. I'm going to think that there may be other issues that could be addressed on this building. But I don't think we're getting this right. And I personally would be very reluctant to proceed on this as it stands at the moment. And I'll leave it now for members to make their own comments, having bored you all to death. Sorry about that. Right, Ginny.
This is a really difficult one. In one respect, we have to accept that this barn, in that it's been around for a very long time, the actual building and repair of it will have evolved over the years, and people will have made use of modern technology as it stood then to actually make sure that we secure this barn for the longevity that it's been already and for the future. But on the other hand, I do understand this point about putting the membrane in. And I just wanted to open it up and ask the question, is there a compromise to be reached with some of it with the membrane and some of it with the more traditional torching?
Well, that's one possibility. Bill?
Thank you. Again, it's in my parish, so it's really interesting to see this, and I'll have some comments about that at the end. But personally, I'm very clear that this is development under the Town and Country Planning Act. There's a very high bar for listed buildings, and when people come to this for listed building consent, then often what appears to be very minor works are subject to our scrutiny. There's the introduction of new materials and the introduction of a new roof structure, as far as I can see, and this would be applied to other applications. I think it's a fact that this barn has been around for a very long time. I don't think anyone disputes it's a very important building, and it is owned by the National Park, and as such we have a enormous duty towards it. And also, I think it's a fact that traditional repairs have served this building very well over hundreds of years, so they clearly work. So I think we ought to remember that long before plastic was developed or discovered or whatever. So I was just struck by that. I understand that a modern solution is very practical. It has energy efficiencies. Although I would say on that, because that was mentioned, without knowing what the plans are, we're not going to talk about that, knowing what the energy efficiencies are irrelevant. So I can envisage a structure where there is full visual contact with the roof, but any energy efficiencies need to be made in other modules within that shell. So I don't think the argument for energy efficiencies necessarily stand for the roof structure. If you understand what I mean, that's why we need to think a bit wider about this. I understand the urgency of the work, although nothing's been done for a number of years. So why it's suddenly urgent, I think, whether it's all going to go bad very quickly. But I also understand that it's technically possible to start traditional work on it. I don't understand that can't be possible straight away as well. I think there would be a visual disturbance to an important Grade 2 listed building, and which is unique in this area, and I think it's been quoted one of the most important agricultural buildings in the National Park. I think a scheme using traditional materials could be started straight away, and we have a duty to future-proof the heritage, and do that in a way that ensures a range of future uses, which includes people enjoying and appreciating and understanding the historic structure. I also think it's important that we support the technical view of the authority, because if we don't do that, then we're in difficulty in other applications, and that's just perhaps a side issue because we need to look at the merits of this, but I think that's really important that we respect very technical advice. And I think that's about it. And I would just say that although we're not talking about the context, as a local resident, the Crook Barn is a mysterious sort of private thing that has very little access. So, and in terms of health and safety concerns, I'm not sure with access. The public hasn't got access, so I think that can be managed within the users of the site. So I don't think that's a reason for overriding any important listed building things that I've mentioned. I think there is a context, and I'm really heartened to know that there are really good plans to develop it in the future, because I think that's essential, because at the moment it appears that it's a fantastic asset which isn't really used at all or accessible at all. I would move to refuse this application if when called to do so, or someone else could do that. But anyway, I think they're my thoughts. Thank you.
Ken?
Thank you, Chair. I think on one level it's unfortunate that these issues weren't resolved before coming to committee, but we are where we are. I thought your comments in opening the discussion, Chair, were very interesting. The preserving element, am I right in assuming that from your perspective you're saying because of that requirement we can only consider replacing felt with felt, or are we in a position where the principle of somehow weatherproofing the underside of the roof is acceptable to everyone? It's the precise method that is the issue of preserving the weatherproofing. Do you see where I'm coming from?
I'm not sure that I know the answer to that. All I'm saying is that, in principle, replacing a liner with a liner would appear to be within the meaning of preservation. It's interesting in one of the reports that the conservation officer talks about the need for restoration in the context of torching. That goes beyond what we're talking about here. In theory, I'm not saying it's wrong to do it. I'm as baffled as everybody else by this.
Well, given that there appears to be evidence of torching having occurred previously.
Yeah.
So that was one question.
Let Brian talk.
Sorry. Okay. Another question is it's quite clear that the earlier felting has failed, which brings to mind the question, so what is the life expectancy of felt against the life expectancy of torching? Torching may not have a lot of research background, but it's a very traditional method of weatherproofing the underside of roofs. So that's one question. The other is the impact of what I've noted down as the impact of torching versus that of felt. And Beth, I think, was answering in part some of the questions that were running through my mind. But the report refers to torching as a means of preventing the ingress of moisture. That is then, insofar as it is absorbed, as I understand it, by the lime mortar that the torching comprises, and then that's dried through wind action. So moisture isn't getting into the underside of the roof. One element then is that the torching I have seen is always done after the slates have been put on, necessarily, but does that mean therefore there isn't torching on top of the rafters because it's difficult to access that particular position? So are some of the timbers at risk with torching? Conversely, if we're using felt, that means there's no way of preventing the ingress of moisture, so moisture is getting in. So is it permeating through the felt and into the interior, where it wouldn't have done so, I don't think, so much with torching, or is it collecting and either running down the felt or what is happening to it? So I hope you see where I'm coming from. I'm just confused as to quite what these different methodologies are. So, quite apart from those questions, it does seem to me, I think, Chair, you touched on it as well, that in a sense we need to know what is being proposed for the internal arrangements of any future development inside the building in order to be able to assess whether or not what is being proposed to weatherproof the interior is most appropriate. And while Hannah's presentation, with all due respect, because I have a lot of respect for Hannah, was informative in what is being proposed, it seemed to me that was the kind of thing we were warned about we can't take into account. So we still don't know what is being proposed, and therefore whether the approach to the weatherproofing, the insulation of the interior is the appropriate way forward and is the most appropriate way, a methodology that's going to be applied. Now, I feel rather like I think you did, Chair. That's a lot of detail, but it reflects my concerns and confusion.
I'm sorry, Mike, I'm just going to... It's a lot of detail, which I don't think any of us around this table are qualified to provide the answer to, and which is the problem, Michael.
Thank you, Chair. In the absence of being able to find any record as to when the felting was put in to the building, what analysis has been carried out to date it that would give us some indication
2,000 years BC. Yeah.
Well, obviously not. The felting is much more recent than that, and it struck me that it could fall either side of 1967, given that it's a bitumen product. But I suppose that in itself doesn't take us any further forward. But
Phil,
we are so lucky to have been given this, not just this building, but we also have the other farm buildings further south around the village of Worslow Estate. But how unlucky we are to now be in the process of having to find remedies to restore them to their with some historical accuracy, so that they are fairly accurate representations of what was there in the past.
Ken?
Yeah, it's rather confusing this, because in the real world we're all puddings and we expect experts to tell us,
yes,
so we can make his mind up. So we've got construction side experts telling us this is the best way to prevent dew point collecting under slates. We've got planners saying that it detracts from the aesthetic of the barn, but I'd rather go in to see a barn with crook beams rather than bottom of concrete slates. So I would also expect construction side to come forward with most modern, effective way of preserving the barn's integrity. So I would actually move this resolution for approval.
That is a motion. That is a motion. Sorry, it's been moved. We got a motion. What was that? To refuse?
Yes.
Oh, I thought that was an inclination rather than a motion. That's a motion to refuse on grounds set out. And then there's an amendment. Well, not an amendment, but an alternative there. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, just on that whole point of development, is it development, that kind of question, and I think we've accepted a listed building application, and we're clear that because it's not just repair and not just like for like, but there is a material difference, to the materials being brought in. And that has a different impact, to the character and appearance of the building. And in that respect, I think we apply tests for development on that basis.
Yes,
We're applying policy tests.
I think the problem we're having is that we're not being helped by the processes we're going through.
Okay.
Could I just draw it back to the current application? The application is for repairs and renovation of an agricultural building.
Yeah.
We've heard from our experts that the modern membrane isn't required to achieve that. There are alternatives. The plastic membrane is only proposed now because it better facilitates a future use, which we don't know what that will be. We all support a long-term viable use for the building, but that's not before us at this stage. It's very clear whether the bitumen roof felt is lawful or unlawful, and it hasn't been contested by the applicant. We could indeed ask them, they're here. But nevertheless, what is proposed is a white plastic membrane, which is harmful, which we advise isn't outweighed by any public benefits.
But none of that appears in our report. This is the problem we're having. Andrew?
Yeah, it's perplexing you, Chair, and you're a qualified solicitor with tremendous amount of local authority experience. So
this is a first for me, by the way.
But the rest of us, it is a very difficult situation where we have one side of the authority says one thing, planners say another thing. The planners are trying to interpret the law as such, and our other officers are anticipating a possible use in the future that we don't know what it is.
Right.
It isn't. We're making a decision that's forward thinking where we haven't got a clue of what's going to happen. So-
Can I just say, I think we're overdoing that argument. This building is going to have a new use, and it's going to have a new use of some sort that's going to involve human occupation, and that human occupation is going to require insulation. I don't care however you put that together. It doesn't really matter whether it's this use or that use. It's going to happen. Well, it will happen.
No, but there is a point to make there.
Okay, well, by all means make the point, but let's be realistic about it.
Do you want me to stand down while...
Can I just say, yeah, we're saying we don't disagree with that point at all. I completely agree that a use needs to be brought into that building. What you've got, and we saw yesterday, is a long-range building, you know, with a range of interests from one end to the other. And there's opportunity there, I would say a great opportunity for us as a National Park Authority, to reveal and enjoy how that's been constructed. To see that. Now that might be that we're talking about proportions within the building rather than all one technique. But we don't know yet, and that's part of the don't know question about what we're going to put in, how much, when. But I think, personally, knowing our purposes and knowing our policies and the opportunity of a barn like that and who we are as an organisation, the opportunity to reveal a big chunk of that, to show traditional methods, is fantastic. And we shouldn't lose that opportunity either.
Okay, sorry, Andrew, would you like to finish? I do apologise.
The whole principle is the reason it's listed, it's grade 2 star. And I've got family connections with grade 2 star buildings in Cheshire before now. They are extremely difficult to maintain.
It's grade 2.
To stay within the law. And I think, what's it? It's an ancient Chinese general called Sun Tzu said, "Fight the battle where it is." We don't know what the potential use is going to be, so we have to work around the principle of our decision making that we've got to really sort of keep to perhaps the traditional methods for the time being to preserve what we've got, and then assess it again when we find the eventual use or proportional use of the building. So I would tend to err with a sense of caution towards the traditional methods and to remove any potential illegalities that may have been put in under past regimes.
Phil, I wonder whether you'd like to join us. We clearly have in front of us two potential resolutions. One is to refuse and one to permit. But the reservations that we've had are fairly clear. What?
Phil isn't down as a speaker.
Well, he's our chief executive. He's our principal advisor. And I think we need to get to grips with this one way or another. We have the opportunity of refusing it, which is what has been proposed. And in my view, that would be not following the rules that we were starting with, but that seems to be in debate. The question is whether the officers would like time to review the discussion that's taken place today and to come up with clearer advice for us as to a sensible way forward in the light of what's been discussed. We've heard about the urgency. We could, if necessary, summon a meeting at short notice after the next authority meeting to make any further decisions. But what I don't feel able to do today is to make a decision one way or the other on this, because I don't think the advice we've got is clear. The technical advice is conflicting. We're not in a position to resolve that technical advice. I'm sure in my own mind that the officers, if they actually listened to each other, would be able to agree on some of that technical advice, and we might be able to find a way forward. But at the moment, I'm in some difficulty. Jean, and I do apologise.
Yeah, Angela, I'll be very careful with what I say. I won't really comment on the discussion. What I will comment on from listening to it is I think we've got really proficient technical officers across the whole authority, and I think the balance of argument, I feel, hasn't necessarily reflected the expertise of the officers bringing forward the application, because they are, and I say, we have been through lots of on-site, off-site meetings with all of the officers on all of the side who are all professional and expert in their opinion, and we've tried really hard to resolve the differences of opinions and come to an agreement, and we haven't been able to. So I'm not sure more time will achieve that. What you've got is professionals and experts in their own fields saying each thing they're saying they think is the best thing, and they think they've got evidence to back that up. And that's why I felt it was important to bring this to members to hear all of that and come to a view.
Okay, well...
Do you want me to answer some of the questions that were raised earlier?
If you feel you have an answer to them.
Yeah, sure.
Is that working now? So it was the issue of the lifespan of membranes versus torching was raised. I believe the membrane in question has a guaranteed life of 25 years. Torching and a well-laid roof will last for about 100 plus years. We still see examples of torching.
That's not our point.
And the other issue is in terms of expertise and the use of modern construction materials. You have to understand the built environment team, we're not planners, we're conservation officers. Two of us are accredited by the Institute of Historic Building Conservation. That includes technical conservation knowledge, including building pathology. And so, you know, generally we do have a good grasp of these things. And I understand the kind of general lay approach to, okay, yes, let's use the most modern building technology available. Unfortunately, there's always a risk of maladaptation from that. And most of our work is actually dealing with the consequences of people with that mindset in the past. For instance, by cement pointing, cement rendering, putting in felt. One of the contributing factors to the roof decaying might have even been the felt, because it inhibits drying and it makes it difficult to see any leaks as well. Yeah, I don't know if anybody else had any other questions regarding that.
Well, I'm going to take Ginny next, but I am going to sort of bring this to a rapid halt shortly. Ginny?
Yeah, it's a question really for the Conservation Officer. Is it possible to combine the two?
You mean in different parts of the building? I mean, I don't want to stray too much into the area that we've been told not to talk about, which is future use. But the way our team feels is that you've got a very large building and it has different phases and different areas of it have different significance. So the most important part of the building is the long cruck range and particularly the hayloft. The ground floor has been messed around with. There's not really much of interest in the ground floor. And then the southeastern extension is formed several phases from the 18th and the 19th century and is still significant in its own right, but less significant. And while technically the arguments are still the same, you know, if it was a case of having to accept a membrane in the less significant part of the building in order to get the really important part of the building, the cruck, repaired, that's a compromise that we would be willing to make. Especially as and this is one of the issues with talking about any future uses and future-proofing the building. You have to remember this is one of the most important buildings we have that we own, that's in the national park. And there's no guarantee that, although I think certainly we'd be able to do something with the building, and that's everybody's ambition, there's no guarantee that you would necessarily be able to do something with the hayloft. But, you know, in the southeast corner, certainly. So I think that's a possibility, yeah.
Right. Where we're... Oh, sorry, Hannah, yes.
Sorry, I just wanted to jump in to just clarify one point because it's important. The membrane doesn't have a lifespan of 25 years. It has a warranty, like a television, for 25 years. It is expected to last the lifetime of a roof, and I felt that was important to justify. Thank you, Chair.
You see, all of which demonstrates the problem that we are in, and I don't feel qualified to make a decision. Bill, you were the first person to move, you moved that it should be refused. Nobody seconded that. I don't know whether anybody wishes to do so. My instinct, I have to say to you, is to defer and get a report that we can actually understand and cope with and really get to the grips on. But if somebody wishes to second Bill's motion, no? So nobody has seconded it, so that motion doesn't go ahead. Jean, you wanted to defer. Is that seconded? That's seconded by a lot of people. And anybody has any comments to make on the, including any officers, on the subject of deferral? Ken?
It's just that if we are going to defer, Chair, I think that any report that comes back to us should be accompanied by a planning application for development, so it has a context that we can understand.
Or should be limited to what is absolutely necessary to deal with the immediate problem.
My preference would be a
yes,
planning application.
I know, but you know, we're going to have a pile of stones on our hands shortly if we don't get on.
Sure, but I don't think it should be on the wit of person to get an application together, because we aren't going to meet the autumn window for this year. And one comment I would make is, if that ridge beam is in danger of collapse, why isn't it being supported in some way now?
Well, that is a question for the technical people. And has anybody got... Bill?
Yeah, just to add to that, yes, I think deferral must come with... because we can't just look at the same thing again, because we're just going to have the same argument again. So I think deferral must come with an expectation that there are some plans. So, for instance, it makes a difference whether you're going to develop right up to the roof or you're going to develop within the shell something different. They make a massive difference into how you can view this application. So I think that's essential to a deferral. Really. And also, obviously, mitigating works would need to be done. You know, to expect that. You know, if something's in imminent collapse or danger, you have to do those, and it comes with. I think that deferral comes with that expectation as well.
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you. You did say any officers. I feel, I do want to pay credit to all the officers who've worked incredibly hard to get this here. My concern about deferring for a report, where more can be understood. This report was very, very carefully constructed over a long period of time, lots of input, there were lots of meetings. I'm not sure if it's deferred to come back with the same proposal with more clarity, we are necessarily going to get that. However, to come back with a plan for future use, I think would take away the big problem that we've got here, which is that your members can't judge the repair against what it might be used for in the future. So, I think what Ken suggested is good. I think it raises questions about the water tightness of the building and so on, and our team will have to go back and have a look at that. But I can't see another report coming forward that doesn't have the future use of the building and members being able to come to a decision, because I don't think there will be an agreement from all parties, all officers, as to what should be done here.
I'm putting this at the very lowest level. It would be helpful if, when somebody says it'll let in water and the other one says it doesn't let in water, if we could just tie those up together and find out whether it does or not. That's at its very lowest level. The reason I would support deferral is not because I'm necessarily asking for a report to come back, but because I don't want to strike something in the ground and say, that's it. I want the opportunity for you to go away, think through what's been said, work out what it is, and if you decide to withdraw the application and take another route, or come back to us, because if you can come back very, very quickly for some reason or other, it gives you that opportunity. But I'm not expecting anything out of it in terms of what we as a committee do. I'm just giving you the opportunity. I would just be giving you the opportunity to look at it in the light of what's been said and try and sort of pull the pieces together, because at the moment we're not doing it. Yes.
I'm happy to do that. I just don't think the kind of clarity you're asking for is going to be possible, because I think there will remain a professional difference of opinion of which can be backed up by evidence to support both sides.
Right, well, in that case, let's have the evidence, because at the moment we've not even got that in front of us.
I think some of it was presented by the applicants, but didn't necessarily come through.
But we then get Hannah coming along, I think it was that, no, it might have been the other one, coming along and saying, well, the report doesn't tell us this and the report doesn't tell us that. We are in some difficulty. We can't make that technical decision. What?
I think we need to move on.
Yes.
We don't have a conversation.
Yeah. Sorry, what's the matter?
I think we need to move on with the deferral vote.
Well, that's what I'm going to do, but I'm listening to the advice of our Chief Executive. Rachel, and then I'm going to take a vote shortly.
Okay, I just want to say I don't disagree with deferring, but I have listened to arguments from two sides, and I don't think we're going to get much, as Phil says, I don't think we're going to get a report that gives us a lot more clarity. What I do know from my experience is that if we want to develop a building that requires a HLF application, that isn't going to take a year. That's likely to take 2, maybe 3 years to get to a definitive plan of what this building might be used for in the future. In the meantime, the building is subject to deterioration. And I think we need to find, there's going to have to be an interim period of this is what we might do temporarily to secure the building, then with a long-term view of this is what we've developed during a HLF application, where you'll effectively have 2 years of a development phase, where you'll work out everything that you want to do within that development, within the delivery phase, and then you'll deliver it in the 3rd year. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you for that. We have it proposed and seconded. All those in favour of deferral? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That is carried. Those against? Those abstaining? 2. Okay. Thank you. We need to move on now. The next one we've got is the... Oh, yes, I do. Sorry. Thank you very much. Yes, that's what I was about to do that without telling anybody. Members, what I'm going to do next, and I apologise to the staff present, but we've had members of the public waiting for the next application. I'm going to guess that we will get on to Parsley Hay at about 1:15. So if we can move on, that's as long as we don't have any other problems. Right. So I'm going to move on to agenda item 10, which is 1 Tearsall View, the Square, Wensley, because we have members of the public present who want to address us. Somebody will speak first, and then we'll invite you to talk.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, John, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Yes, this application seeks plan permission for the conversion and alteration of a barn attached to the dwelling house and for a single-storey flat roof extension to the rear of 1 Tearsall View, the Square, Wensley. But before moving to the presentation, I would highlight to members that there was an update to the office recommendation for this application. During the application, the agent, on behalf of the applicant, stated that a preliminary bat survey would be submitted following a response from the authority's ecologist that the barn does have bat roost potential. This survey to date has not been submitted. Therefore, the authority would seek to add an additional reason for refusal due to insufficient information being provided that demonstrates that the works would not harm protected species. As such, the application would be deemed contrary to core strategy policy L2 and development management policies DMC 11 and DMC 12. The application has been referred to committee today as 12 letters of support have been received, contrary to the officer recommendation of refusal. So I shall now move to the slides. Slide 1. This property is is set off the square in the village centre of Wensley. The property is within the Wensley Conservation Area, and the property is considered a non-designated heritage asset. So you can see the red line there with the property which is semi-detached. So this slide shows the block plan. The projection to the rear in white with black outline is the proposed extension. The extension will measure 7.49 metres wide and 5.5 metres deep. You can also see 2 roof lights will be added to the barn. A couple of photographs to share. This is the front elevation of the property. It's a traditional semi-detached dwelling. The stone barn is attached to the east of the property and is built from random coarse limestone with a slate roof. Due to the sloping site, the floor level of the barn is 1.2 metres below the floor level of the house, which this photo can sort of illustrate there. So next slide shows the photo from a rear elevation. The photo is taken from the southeast of the garden. The barn is to the right edge of that photograph. The extension, I'll go on to share the proposed plans in a moment. The extension would wrap around from the brick lean-to, which is sort of just off-centre to the left there, and that would be removed, and that extension would wrap around to connect to the barn, which is on the far right of that photograph. This is a more clear view of the barn itself. And the next one is a front-on photograph of the barn. And a final photo to share is the rear elevation of the main dwelling with that brick lean-to. And then to the left of that image is the attached neighbouring property. Now I'll go on to show you the proposed existing and proposed plans. So this is the existing floor plan. You might be able to see on there the barn to the right side. I don't know if the case is picking it up. You can see where it says barn. You can see it's minus 1.2 metres. That's the floor levels below the main house. And this is what's proposed. So the floor level of the barn will be increased to be at the same level as the house. And you would then have the wraparound extension where you can see the living and utility area. The barn conversion element would provide a bedroom and accessible bathroom. And as I say, would have the floor level raised to allow level access to the main house. So in terms of the roof plan, that's existing, and then proposed, you can see that wraparound extension to the rear, and then you can see the 2 new roof lights, one on the front elevation, one to the rear roof slope of the barn. Again, this is existing north elevation, the front elevation of the property, and then the proposed front elevation. So again, 1 roof light added, and then you can see the 2 doors. They will become decorative only. Effectively, they will no longer be usable because of the internal space. The floor level of the barn internally will be raised. Again, now this is the rear elevation, as is, and the proposed. So here you can see the wraparound flat roof vertical cladding added to the rear extension. The barn there, you can see the 1 roof light, and the increase in height of the barn is about 0.15 metres, 150 mil. And last few plans to share. This is the side elevation. And then this is the proposed side elevation. So again, the ridge of the barn is slightly increased, and then you've got the large flat roofed extension going from the barn, wrapping around to the main dwelling. And then there's a 3D image which shows what it would appear. So I'm not going to obviously repeat the report. The members have had that to read over, but I'll provide a very brief summary of the recommendation. It is noted that applicants have stated the development is designed to ensure the main dwelling and barn can provide accessible living accommodation. And they stated that to achieve this end, there is a need for level access to living space, a bedroom and bathroom facilities. Though the personal circumstances of the applicants are acknowledged, it is concluded that the benefits to the applicants will be temporary, whereas if approved, the planning harm identified in the officer's report would remain. Overall, there are two reasons for the recommendation of refusal. One, as stated at the beginning, is the absence of ecological information relating to potential impacts on protected species. The other reason, as made clear in the officer's report, is that the extension, due to its scale, massing and exterior materials, would relate poorly to the dwelling house and barn. The extension will be a substantial structure that wraps around the rear and side of the dwelling house, and particularly with a flat roof abuts the roof of the barn at a high level, it would result in a contrived and awkward interrelationship with the traditional form and character of the existing property. The harm to the non-designated heritage assets and conservation area will be considered unacceptable, and there will be no wider public benefits, though acknowledged there will be private benefits to outweigh that harm, and for those reasons the application is recommended for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have two speakers. Mrs. Roberts, would you like, you're going to speak first, are you? Yeah, right, Claire Lang. Thank you. That's right, you've got 3 minutes to address us.
Brilliant, thank you. First thing I'd like to say is a BAT survey has been done and they're writing up the report, so we're waiting on that and understand that no approval can go through until that's been submitted. So Stephen Gray approached me to work with them on their project early this year. They're briefed to design a functional and safe living environment for Graham. Facilities needed to be on a level threshold with wheelchair accessibility, including a bedroom, bathroom, and access to the living area, kitchen and garden. With the footprint of the house relatively small, the single-storey barn, which is unused, provided an opportunity to increase the living space with the extension necessary to link the barn with the kitchen to the rear. The proposal is designed to respect the character of the house and the barn, replacing the two lean-to add-ons that were on the photo to the rear. The flat roof and the timber cladding offer a contrast in design, which is better revealing the character of the existing buildings. Similar contemporary extensions with flat roofs have been granted permission in the conservation area. The officer report states the harm would be less than substantial, but would not be outweighed by public benefits. And I'd just like to take the opportunity to briefly outline the public benefits. Planning policy states that when a development will lead to less than substantial harm, as is the case here, the harm should be weighed against the public benefits of the proposal, including, where appropriate, securing its optimum viable use. The barn has a local historic value, and giving it a viable use will lead to investment in its maintenance and conservation, and this in itself is public benefit. Its size limits its viable economic uses, being too small to be converted into a self-contained holiday let, too much maintenance to financially justify using it as an outbuilding or a home office. The proposed scheme is sensitive to the existing character and appearance, with the extension being hidden to the rear. We've designed the connection to the barn to be minimal and set below the ridgeline, so it's not visible at all from the front. Even from the rear, more than half the length of the barn will remain exposed. The new insulated roof will reuse the existing or use reclaimed tile slates and incorporate small flush conservation skylights. And the doors and windows will be replaced with timber replication units and the walls repaired and repointed. The internal level will be raised, but this won't affect the barn external structure at all, and this could be temporary, be able to be taken down. These changes will result in an improvement to the building both visually and structurally. And on balance, the rear, non-publicly visible changes won't lead to an unacceptable loss of significance, and the public benefits of restoring the asset outweigh the less than substantial harm. Also, the amount of local support for this application reinforces the public benefits, and seeing the restoration of a traditional local building and allowing a valued member of the community, Graham, to remain in the village in his house. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then we have Ms. Roberts. No, there's a little button in front of you. Thank you very much. And you have 3 minutes.
Thanks. Our purpose for this application is twofold. My husband Gray's declining health and an opportunity to restore the barn, which over the years has fallen into disrepair. I won't dwell on Gray's health, as that is not the issue here, but you will understand that that is important to me, and that it is his health that instigated the reason for this application, which is to provide him with one-level wheelchair accessible accommodation for the time when he can no longer reach the stairlift and would then for the rest of his life be confined to one upstairs room. As Claire has mentioned, the barn is too small to provide a standalone accommodation such as a holiday let, and positioned as it is away from public access, it is not viable for commercial usage. Restoring it to its original agricultural purpose would not sit with the village as it is today, nor to the pair of relatively recent semi-detached houses, that's numbers 1 and 2, Tearsall View, which replaced the old farmhouse that originally partnered the barn. However, as the barn is one of the last untouched buildings in the village, it would be a shame to lose it. Bringing the barn into usage as proposed will provide the opportunity to restore and maintain it, which otherwise would not be considered to be financially viable. The design, local materials and existing materials to be reused have been chosen specifically to represent current contemporary barns, and although this extension would only be visible from the garden. Many of these points have been raised by local Wensley residents and further include that the extension and works are modest, in a secluded point in the village, and will not be visible to most residents, neighbours and visitors. The neighbour who has full sight of the front of the barn, which would be repaired but left structurally unchanged, is particularly in support of the proposal. The proposal would have no visual impact on nor overshadow any other property, whilst the currently obsolete barn would, however, gain a function. The alternative concern being that a difficult-to-use practically building is likely to fall into further disrepair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, Kath.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, if you look at page 82, it says South Darley Parish Council, no response received to date. I went to the Parish Council meeting on Tuesday night, and apparently they had a meeting to discuss this application, and they were in total agreement, and you should have the comments. That's my first point.
Can we just, before you make another point, can we just, John, did you check up on that after yesterday?
I did check the file. We have not received comments on this application from the parish. So the case officer, I can get in touch with the parish council directly. However, to date, we have not received any comments submitted to us.
I think we must proceed on the basis that we assume the parish council is supporting it from what you've said. So let's move on. What's your next point, Kath?
Right. I had an uncle who lost his leg in the First World War, and we were very privileged, really, to look after him. But it comes with your problems, and I fully understand what this family are going through. And I mean, we went to basically every room nearly, except the kitchen, etc., putting toilets in so that we could get him into a toilet quickly. When we have 2,650 barns in this national park, to me, they are assets. I think of how they came to be built, the people that built them, and the service they performed. And I think this is an excellent form of using this barn. I don't want to dwell too much, but it was at this parish council that I first had my encounter about 28 years ago over a barn when a farmer, not far from where this lady lives, put in to convert a barn, and the officer stood where Patrick is there. He stood there and he said, "You must go and live in Darley Dale." That was 3 miles away. We've got to be more understanding. And I feel that this is an excellent ensuite facility, which is absolutely needed. From experience, I just know that you can't do without a toilet that is easily accessible. And so I won't go on because time is going on, but I would like to propose approval of this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Members? Okay. Oh, Rachel.
I don't disagree with Kath, but I would just, I mean, we've not received the back report yet, and I think without that, as the agent said, I don't think we're at a point where we can refuse or accept this application because we don't have the information necessary. Thanks.
So the information about the bats, you mean? I think what we should try and avoid, if possible, is having to bring it back to us at some stage in the future. It would be possible, if this is what the committee wanted, and I'm neutral on that, it would be possible to make a decision, and if it's a positive decision, it would be subject to the outcome of the bat survey. If that's all right with you, right? Okay.
That would be acceptable for me.
Any other members? Can I first of all stop before we go any further and say, are you all in favour of going on past 1 o'clock? Okay, that's agreed. Thank you. What's the question?
Yeah, sorry. Can I give some advice in relation to the bats?
Please. Oh, in relation to the bats, yes.
Yes. So it's not something that can be conditioned?
No, I wasn't suggesting that. I was suggesting that if Kath's motion was favourably viewed, it could be on the basis that it would be permitted once we've got the bat survey, if the bat survey is okay. Yeah. Okay. Is that all right?
Yeah, that's okay.
That's all I was suggesting. Okay. Sorry, my voice is going, and it's not easy to keep these things going. Can I just say, I totally understand where the officers are coming from on this, with the design of it. And I'm wondering whether any effort has been put into trying to find modifications that might make this a bit easier within the context of a conservation area.
I'll just make a couple of points. First of all, the conversion and the works to the barn themselves, you know, we acknowledge it is in a poor state of repair at the moment. We would like to see it reused. The internal changes will be acceptable. The small increase in the height will be acceptable. The roof lights, we raise no issue with that either. In terms of design, the sole issue here really is the size of the flat roofed extension.
Sorry, it's the
size, the height, the massing of the flat roof extension. So we do not contradict the points raised about the reuse of the barn whatsoever. It is purely the design of the extension itself. In terms of a different style or different, I think that was the point that you're pushing at. The officers, we would be happy to continue to engage in terms of coming up with a different scheme, but ultimately what we have in front of us is something that we cannot recommend for approval for the reasons outlined. We do believe if we continue to engage outside of the application process, we could find a way to bring that barn in use for the applicants, but at the same time having a design that is much more sympathetic to the non-designated heritage assets. But obviously we can only make the assessment today on what we have in front of us.
I get that, but because of the nature of this application, I think we have to be very precise as to where we find objection, if I can put it that way around. It does seem to me that because of the particular use to which this is going to be put, one has to be careful about what's referred to here as scale and massing, because I think you can't get away from this sort of level of scale and massing in order to accommodate the use proposed. So if one is going to question the design, it's got to be more related to the actual design itself and the materials rather than the scale and massing, would be my view. I don't know whether members would agree with that or not, but that would be my view. And I'm wondering whether, within that parameter, whether material improvements could be achieved.
In terms of the reason for the recommendation of refusal, yes, the materials will also feature, but the scale and mass will remain deemed unacceptable by officers.
I get it that you think that, but
yes.
I'm listening to Kath's motion and wondering where it's going to go, and seeing where it might lead. For those members who weren't here, shortly, Ken, for those members who weren't here yesterday, I think one of the things we observed, which I think has come out in the presentations, is that this is not readily visible from public places. And I think that's something that needs to be thought about. Ken?
Yeah, it's just a point of technicality. We're here to discuss this application, not what if or whatever. It's a simple yes or no. And public interest, there's been no letters of objections at all. So either the public aren't interested or those 12 who have wrote in are interested. And there is a motion on the table, and I will second that.
Okay, motion's on the table. Ken?
Just, I think, kind of in support of what the direction of travel that you've had, Chair, that I think there is an issue with the scale and massing and particularly materials of this. And I think that we ought to be going back to discuss with the applicant and the agent better ways of achieving what is obviously desired and understandably required, but I just don't see this as the solution as presented.
Okay. Anybody else got any comments to make? Martin?
Right, I agree with Ken. I've got no problems with the barn, particularly if the floor can be put back to its original height if required. The extension, I just feel, is perhaps well, if it can be made smaller or less prominent, even though it isn't visible from the public realm, that would be an advantage. So I'd like to see whether an improvement can be made.
Right. So I have a proposal and second. Oh, sorry, Bill.
Yeah, just briefly, I think the applicants have a very strong case to provide that level accommodation. That's really important. But I think the problem is a conservation area. Let's bear in mind, this development will be there for a very, very long time. And I think particularly more than the massing, but I think particularly the materials are an important consideration. And you know, it's non-traditional materials, and I'm not so worried about the glazing, but certainly materials. And I will mention for the Parsley Hay application, we went yesterday and saw that you know, materials that are not traditional just weather badly. You know, it's just something we just need to bear in mind, and would be it's out of keeping with the conservation area. So I think if some work could be done around that, I think, you know, basically the proposal is very sound, but I think the detailing is problematic. You know, bear in mind it is a conservation area, and we need to set standards that for future applications as well. You know, we can't judge. You know, we judge each one on its merits, but it's in a context of a wider view, really. Thank you.
I detect out of that part of the discussion that there's an amendment floating around somewhere in the air, which is on the lines of to approve in principle what's in front of us here, but to ask the officers to go back and work on the design. That would be the amendment that I think Bill and Ken are working on, isn't it?
Can I just ask for clarity just for the case officer so we can know exactly what we'll be looking to do?
I think we're looking mainly at materials.
So the form and massing is okay,
The
size is okay.
It's got to be of a size that enables it to function properly for the person that's going to occupy it.
Yeah.
That's the main thing. Within that parameter, the request, I think, would be to improve materials and design and try and make it work.
Yeah, so traditional materials, are we talking about members would like to see either render to match the house or stone to match the barn, one of those possibly?
I think we would. I think we would ask you to work with the applicant to get it as there's going to have to be compromise here, isn't there? So the compromise is to get the best we can out of it. And
no, I just want to be clear what members are effectively determining that they want us to do, so we can follow it through. That's all.
Render or stone. See what you can do. But I think the side fenestration, for example, that long slit is wrong. That needs to be taken out and so on and so forth. So I've outlined what might be an amendment. Is anybody prepared to propose that? If what?
That the size is not affected? You're
No.
only talking about...
I think that's coming, that's part
fine.
of the thing that we're dealing with. So we have an amendment and then we have a proposal. All those in favour of the amendment, which is to work on trying to get the design right.
Was the amendment seconded, sorry?
Yes, it was. It was no, well, we've got two proposals. 1, 2, that's seconded.
This is an amendment.
This is an amendment. So I'm putting the amendment first, which is that it be deferred to enable those things to happen. All those in favour of amendment? Anyone against? No. In that case, that's carried unanimously, isn't it? Yes, okay. That's carried unanimously.
So now we get back to the motion.
Then now the motion is to do the same thing again. All those in favour of deferring it? Okay, thank you very much.
Chair, I didn't mention defer when we were talking about it. The motion is for approval.
Well, we've
Defer it to the next meeting. I'm sorry.
we've approved an amendment, and I've then just put to you, but I'm prepared to put it again for clarity, that the motion now stands with the amendment as to defer to enable the design to be worked on.
No, that's not what our proposal says. So
No, but you.
moved an amendment to our proposal.
Well, an amendment to your proposal has been moved.
You didn't mention deferment in that either.
Sorry.
No way did it mention deferment. It said consultation.
Well, you can't.
We were going to approve in principle to let officers.
Oh, I understand the point you're making. So I think that was understood. We all understood that that's what we're talking about. Yes, we are agreeing it in principle, subject to and taking Jean's point on about the size of it and so on, but getting the what it looks like right as far as we can.
And
yeah. Are we happy with that now? We know where we are. Good. Do you understand where we've got to? Sorry, we've had a long morning and I'm tired.
One small comment, which will probably come out later on. One of the reasons for the flat roof is so that it wouldn't be visible above the ridge of the barn from the front.
That's helpful. We were told that actually on site yesterday.
Yes,
That's
we told that
understandable.
earlier on. I just wanted to stress that.
But
thank you.
You understand the direction we're going in.
Yep.
Right. Where are we up to now? We're back to Parsley Hay, aren't we?
Thank you. Thank you.
Mike Chaplin is leaving us.
You said 1:15 for Parsley Hay, didn't you?
Yes, I will wait until 1:15. Oh, God. agenda item 11, which we did a site visit on yesterday, which was very helpful, I thought. No, we're going to do with 11 as we've been held up. Right. Would you like, Mark, to set off?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And this application is for the erection of a slurry store. Oh, wait, it's not, because we're still on the wrong one on the screen, which is a change of order. Sorry. Right, here we go. So this application is for the erection of a slurry store at Stony Cliff Farm at Upper Hume. Stony Cliff Farm is located in open countryside in the southwest peak. It's 700 metres roughly east of Upper Hume and 900 metres northeast of Blackshore Moor. And you can see the application site on the screen now. If I can get the mouse working. Why can't I see the cursor? Sorry, bear with me. I'm trying to make sure you can see what I can see. Here we go. So this is the farm itself here, which comprises a stone-built farmhouse and a range of modern agricultural buildings. It's accessed along this very long access track that you can see here, and the application site itself is here, with access taken along an existing track running roughly north to south here. The road through Upper Hume runs, you can see at the edge of the picture there, and there's also a range of footpaths which actually aren't marked on the plan here, but that could cross the land to the north between views from the road here and the application site itself. And so this is a more close-up plan of the site itself. So the buildings on the farm are out of sight to the bottom of the plan here. This is the access track coming into the farm that you saw on the last plan, and here is the slurry store. As you'll see in the plans that are coming up and the photographs, the ground slopes downhill significantly south to north. So you can see some planting is proposed around the building here, but this sort of the red square that you can see is effectively cut out into the hillside, and that'll become apparent when I show you the section plans as we go along. And that's showing the existing site plan, and there is the proposed. So this area here is the cutout into the landscape. So this is showing the land reprofiled behind the cylindrical slurry store, and the red line that you can see running across the site, that is the pipe that would feed it. So the store is required to reduce runoff from both the yard and the existing agricultural building, and the intention is to be a gravity-fed system so that the runoff comes down the pipe into the new slurry store here. And this shows the application site. So this is, if I go back again, this boundary that you can see here is this boundary here. So and you can see the land drops off quite steeply here. So it's proposed to excavate this corner of the field, level it, and put the slurry store in that position. This photo is shown to the right, so the corner of the field is just out of shot down here, and this shows the relationship to the existing farm buildings, and so that the pipe would be undergrounded from the buildings here running to the site. And this is showing that along that same boundary again, but this shows the drop off in levels here. There's a brook that runs through the bottom here, and the store itself would effectively cut into the hillside here. And that's looking north out of the site. So again, this is that same boundary. The photos taken stood on the ground that would be excavated essentially. There are footpaths over in this direction, and the road, which I think you came on if you were on the site visit yesterday, is sort of running out of shot over here. It's a little bit blurry, so please excuse it, but this is looking back from that road to the west. Farm buildings are here, and this is the location of the proposed slurry store here to the corner of this field. So you can see there is some tree planting and a degree of screening there. And this is just showing the plans of the building. So it doesn't have a roof on the slurry store. It's open. It's proposed to use a system which is quite often used, which is effectively a floating lid, in effect, which raises up and down based on the content and encloses it that way. I think in this case it's proposed as floating balls. Is that correct here? And this shows a section through. So there's the existing land, dropping down to roughly where that line of trees in the field boundary is at the bottom edge. And so it would be cut through, and you can see it's proposed to be graded back, and the store would sit into the cutout area. The dark black line you can see there is the pipe, which you can see goes below ground until it projects out of the cutaway in the embankment and goes into the top of the slurry store. And these are just props for the pipe. So I'll just go back to a wider scale plan. So the application's acknowledged and accepted in principle. It's obviously intended to reduce groundwater pollution, which is both a regulatory requirement and a benefit to the national park. Our concerns in this case relate solely to the siting of the store. The distance and isolation from the main farm group being the main issue. In the wider landscape, the buildings are already seen, and our concern is that the slurry store in this location will be seen as isolated and separate from that, in views from the footpaths and the roads to the north and the northwest. Whilst there is a degree of screening, particularly in the winter months, that will only be partial, and we feel that the building would be better sited, better related to the main group. Those conversations have been had with the applicant to see if they would entertain other sites closer to the building group. However, they've said because it's a gravity-fed system, and because they feel that the visual impacts of the store are better here than they would be with the farm group as well, they want the application to be determined as submitted based on this location. But because of the landscape impacts that we consider are associated with that, the application is recommended for refusal, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We've got the one speaker, Mr. Groves. Yes, thank you for meeting us yesterday. If you'd like to take a seat in front of you, on the microphone there's a button you can press, and when the red light comes on, you talk to us for 3 minutes.
So can you all hear me?
Yes,
All right,
thank you.
yep. So again, as just been reiterated, I think the need for the slurry store is very much apparent. The applicants have had a catchment sensitive farming report done, which one of the recommendations was again for a slurry store, which is designed to both capture the slurry and surface water runoff. In terms of the location of it and the siting, this is the best location on the farm as it is gravity fed. A gravity fed system doesn't require the use of any pumps or anything like that, which any other sort of location on the site as discussed would require a pump. Pumping it again creates ammonia from the smell as well as odour. This is through the mechanised pumping system, and also it's another thing I think as was highlighted yesterday to go wrong on a farm, which I'm sure as many can appreciate when farming, things that go wrong can cause a lot of problems. The site itself has a robust planting scheme, and this will generally visually screen the slurry store from the wider view of the surrounding area, and yeah, well, very much, we've tried our best to screen it as much as possible. Other than that, I don't think there's a lot more to say, other than that the slurry store will be very beneficial to the farming enterprise. It will prevent harmful surface water runoff, which is a key sort of government target to try and reduce. And yeah, that's it pretty much. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you very much. Members, I've got Ginny first, then Ken, then Rachel.
Thank you, Chair. This seems like an essential part of farming operation. I applaud the fact that it's welcomed by the Environmental Agency, and that they're not going to use any artificial means of getting the slurry. They're looking to use the natural gravity to get the slurry into the slurry tanks. So I would like to move it for approval.
Okay, Ken?
Yeah. What I can't see where it says it's next to a watercourse, isn't it? The site. What provision is to prevent that if there's a bust or a leak on the thing? And also, What happens when it's full? I'm not a farmer.
We had that on site yesterday, and the answer is that somebody will come and slurp it all up and take it away. What?
We've got an answer.
Yeah.
The spec of the tank, its maintenance is covered by Environment Agency regulations. So they're all covered by non-planning regulations. But yes, that would have to be done properly, obviously.
I would just add that the applicant has had conversations with the Environment Agency about the siting, and that's the reason that it's here rather than even further down the hill. It can't be any closer to the brook, so they are aware of those restrictions.
Okay, Ken? Yes. Rachel?
And that was more a question really. Is this development subject to biodiversity net gain?
The application came in before the regulations became mandatory, but it would be now, yes. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ken?
Thanks, Chair. I mean, I can understand the officer's concerns about landscape impact, but with all due respect to that, certainly when we were both approaching the site and leaving on the main road below the Roaches, we did look, and I certainly felt that the existing tree cover along those along the lower boundary, allied with the proposals for screening over time, admittedly, but I did feel that that would mask the proposed development. And like Ginny, I applaud the gravity feed and the rest of it. It did seem to be the most appropriate location, and so I would support the recommendation for approval, Chair.
Are you seconding Ginny's motion? Yeah, okay. Sorry, somebody else put their hands up. Who was that? Martin.
I'd agree with Ken. I asked about the nitrates issue and got positive replies to that, and also how the slurry was going to be removed, and again, very satisfactory answers.
Can I just be absolutely clear? I've just suddenly realised we've got sort of two separate images on the plans. There's one with the tank shown as a pink thing with a sort of frill round its neck, and then there's another one set within a square fence arrangement. Which one's which, and what's happening there? Is the square one the original one? That's one of them, and then the previous one before that.
Yes, I understand. The other one was a more detailed close-up that was provided initially. This is a more detailed scheme that was requested. So this is what you would be looking at. So that.
Because that's the better one of the two, isn't it?
Well, that's right. The other one doesn't show the grading of the land, which is what we request further plans for. If I'm correct.
Right. Well, it's been proposed and seconded. All those in favour? Anyone against? Those abstaining? Oh, I've forgotten about conditions. Let's deal with conditions.
3-year time limit for implementation. Adopt the submitted plans. Secure the finish of the store to make sure it's dark and recessive, including any lid, as it might be. Secure levels and grading of the land, including reseeding after the excavations have taken place. Secure a scheme of spoil removal. There'll obviously be quite a lot of excavation required here. And for the buildings to be removed when it's no longer required for agriculture.
That absolutely suits me fine. Is that everybody happy with that? Good, thank you very much. Right, well, we'd better go back. Thank you very much, that's been approved. And we've now got the Parsley Hay. Well, we'll proceed with Parsley Hay. Are they here somewhere? Ah, no, there's another one.
Sorry.
I think it's going to be a very straightforward application, so let's just carry on. Right, who's...
Okay, thank you, Chair. This application is for the development of a changing places toilet facility at Parsley Hay Cycle Hire Centre. And the application site is located approximately 750 metres to the northwest of Parsley Hay Visitor Centre, which is an authority-operated centre. It's located in open countryside, roughly 3.5 kilometres to the northeast of Hartington. And the building currently on the site is on the site of a former railway goods yard and was constructed for this visitor centre purpose. You can see this site here on the screen. So there's the existing building here, and the application site itself is bounded by the red line there. It's a slightly wider view of the site, so you can see you've got the cycle trail running to the south of the building here. And this is a photograph looking along the Tissington Trail in the northwest direction. You can see the existing cycle hire building here. You'll see as we go along the actual proposed changing places unit is to this end of the building here. You wouldn't really see it on this particular approach. This is looking back the other way. So it's be sited on land to this end of the building here. And that's just looking along the building, so you would just see part of it behind the canopy here. And again, it would be positioned roughly in this area here. And a further photograph looking back towards the trail. That's the existing gable end of the Parsley Hay building, and the unit would be just out to the left of the photograph there. Here's an existing site plan, so again you can see the existing building to the right, and the proposed unit would be sited here on a small area of the grass. And that's showing what it would be like in context with the building it's serving. The design, as you'll see through the other elevation plans, is, sorry to show you a floor plan there. So for those who aren't familiar, the changing places toilets, they're larger than standard accessible toilets, and they're generally designed for dependent use so that users can be accompanied by a carer if necessary. And this shows the building in elevation. So I was just starting to say that the design is reflective of and a nod to the railway heritage of the site. Typically we wouldn't be looking for timber-clad buildings of this nature in most sites. Here we've got the railway heritage, and so it's meant to be reflective of the types of units which would have been using the railway here. That's the rear and the two gables. Our officers, as you've seen in the report, have concluded overall the development's acceptable. That's subject to some conditions. The land on which it's proposed to be sited, obviously there'd need to be below ground works for drainage, and that has the potential to impact on the tree roots of adjacent trees. Whilst none of those trees in and of themselves are of high significance, they have a landscape value, and so we'd need to make sure through a condition that was considered in the works, that those impacts on tree roots are avoided as far as possible, and where they can't be avoided, that mitigation's put in place. Equally, it's a form of railway sidings as well, so there's potential that there's heritage interest below ground there. So an archaeological condition to secure a scheme of investigation for a monitoring of the works is also recommended by condition. Subject to those, Chair, the application is recommended for approval.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to move that. Ken?
It's just that the point was made when we were on site visit yesterday, Chair, that the orientation of the unit is at odds with the direction of travel, as it were, and whether or not it could be swiveled through a 90 degrees so that it ran parallel to the track that used to exist. There was going to be some investigation as to whether that was possible.
There's been no time for those investigations since yesterday. A decision could be on the basis that we explore that if members feel it's necessary.
In that case, can I withdraw my motion, if you'll permit me to do it, and to say that we approve it in principle and authorise the officers to settle the final orientation of the truck. Yep. Are you happy with that? Okay. All those in favour? Anyone against? That's it. Thank you very much. Sorry.
Just a comment, not to do with the application. Just I think when we're on site, so it's not.
Sorry, Bill.
So just an observation when we're on site, when we look, and there was a slide, you might want to show the slide of the adjoining building. I just thought it was instructive to me to look at how using non-traditional, unusual, innovative materials. This is a bit of a warning because that looks better on the picture actually, but that, I think all the officers and members who are present on the site visits said that looks absolutely awful, absolutely dreadful, that building. And it was just an instructive point for us to bear in mind if we're looking at something lovely and, oh, this is lovely and new and different. But that's just shambolic, and it also doesn't seem, it seems to be coming away as well. So, you know, no one's here's responsibility, I'm sure, but, you know, I just thought that was instructive.
It does sort of give us a difficult case when we come to telling everybody else to do things well.
Exactly. So,
you know, it's not looking as well as it might it?
We need to reflect on these things, I think.
No, okay. Point taken. Right. The next item I have is agenda item 12. We have Sarah Welsh with us. Thank you for coming, Sarah. And there's a lot of work to be done on this. I don't mean that you haven't done it. I'm just saying there's a lot of work to be done on it. Would you like to introduce it for us?
Hello everyone. The government is consulting on changes to the National Planning Policy Framework and reforms to the planning system. Officers have provided a summary of the consultation within the report. The consultation started on the 30th of July and ends on the 24th of September. The changes to the MPPF could happen relatively quickly post-consultation. The changes proposed through planning reforms will require legislation and will take longer. As a planning authority, we are contributing to a joint English National Parks and Broads response, and officers are also preparing a response to the consultation on behalf of the Peak District National Park. It's important just to note that the consultation doesn't affect our local plan review issues and options consultation that's due to start on the 7th of October. So our recommendations today are to note the contents of the report and that the final consultation responses are delegated to the Head of Planning in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of the Planning Committee.
Thank you very much. Right, members. Well, just to sort of start the ball rolling, one of the issues that's clearly coming out of it for us is going to be the pressure that's going to be put on two of our partner authorities in particular, High Peak and Derbyshire Dales, in terms of housing provision. And I'm sure this is something we need to keep pressing and drawing to government attention, because the more pressure that is put on housing in those areas, particularly, I think, High Peak, because the structure of High Peak is such that it's got a lot of towns and urban areas close up to our boundary. And we need to think very carefully about the setting of the national park and the pressures that this will put on places like High Peak to bring housing nearer to our boundaries. And I do think we need to put a few words of caution in about the settings. There are also one or two things in here where relaxation of one sort or another, or demands for action of one sort or another, do need to have the background of them, a real understanding that even with a policy document like this, ministers are obliged to have regard to national park purposes. So that when, for example, you are talking in terms of things like green infrastructure and so on and so forth, it's very important that the policies they produce and any consequences from that policies, like relaxations of permitted development rights and things like that, reflect their statutory duty to have regard to national park purposes. And I say both of those because I think we're more vulnerable in many ways than many other national parks, because we've got so much heavy development around us. We've really got to be vigilant about what goes on. I'm sure there will be a lot of other things. I mean, I'd like to make some suggestions that they haven't raised, actually. I'd like them to look again at some of these PD rights that they've granted and, you know, camping and caravanning and all these other things. Because the National Planning Policy Framework does give criteria for how you deal with Article 4 directions. Well, we wouldn't need Article 4 directions if the permitted development rights were right in the first place. So I think we need to be looking at things like that. Has anybody got any better ideas? Or worse ones?
I just wanted to mention about housing, because you raised housing, and I think, and I just pick up on the point I made earlier, that the housing situation is fairly critical everywhere in the country, but the national park it's more critical because of the restricted land available and the duties of national parks, the conservation and so forth. And I just feel that the authority needs a policy on housing in terms of planning, whereby we can identify housing for local needs or affordable housing by way of planning conditions, and we don't seem to have that policy at the moment. I know there's a local plan, but that local plan will take a number of years, and I think that there is a tipping point coming up where which we will exceed, such that communities, many communities in the Peak District may become unviable as communities because of that. So I'm just wondering whether that can be seen as something we can act on in terms of report and recommendations and approval prior to waiting for the local plan, because it is a fairly urgent thing. So, for instance, if every time one or two little plots, so we've dealt with little plots today that could be developed for local needs housing to meet the government requirements, and that will ease the pressure on Derbyshire Dales in particular, and I know they're very concerned about having to put all their housing in Derbyshire Dales rather than in the Peak District, and help High Peak with the required housing totals, really. So that's a serious suggestion. I know it's a bit off what normally happens, but we need to respond.
I'm not sure. I'm not quite sure what you're suggesting. I'm sorry.
Well, I've been told, because I've been told a number of times that where an application comes forward, we can't condition it to say that this dwelling, this primary dwelling, because can only be used as a primary residential dwelling and not converted for use as a second home or a holiday let or whatever. And we haven't got the powers to do that at the moment because we haven't got a policy. So I'm suggesting that we develop a policy.
Well, which is what we are doing through the local plan, and in developing a policy, we'll still have to go through the same process as we're going through on the local plan.
And what I'm suggesting is, because the local plan will take a number of years, and because the situation is fairly critical in many of our communities, that we develop that policy perhaps in tandem, but before the local plan is approved, because that will take 2 or 3 years, and I don't think we've got that time at the moment.
I think, Bill, I've got every sympathy with the direction you're coming from. Don't get me wrong, but I do think that we need to think about the resources and keep our mind on the main thing here.
Sarah might be able to tell me, but as part of this consultation on the NPPF, do we have the ability to make suggestions to the government about something else that they could consider? Because the government were talking about adding a new use class, and because the government could introduce a new paragraph into the NPPF, which would effectively be policy about this if they wanted to do so, which we would then have to take into account. So there is a route through that if we could convince the government to do that now.
One of the questions in the consultation is about housing in rural areas. It's just a very open question, so we can give as much feedback as we would like to. I think the government's aware that something needs to be done, but they're asking us what are our opinions on housing in rural areas.
There is a suggestion, I think, in your report, or I might have read it on the screen, I can't remember which bit, that there may be more to come from government on housing in national parks and similar areas. Is that right?
There's further advice on how we calculate the standard methodology to understand our housing needs. So we are in an area where data is difficult to get. So there's data readily available for local authority areas on housing, but it's more difficult to cut that data for national park areas. So we're waiting for more information on how we derive our
yes, that's, I think that's
figures.
what I'm probably trying to deal with, yes. Okay. Any other members? Oh, Martin and then Ken.
What worries me over, well, a couple of things that's worrying me over the government's approach. One is the massive increase in percentages of new homes required towards the north of England. The numbers aren't that large, but the proportions are very large. Within Derbyshire Dales, I think we're talking about 160% increase per annum. That's difficult. The question is are there going to be the jobs for the people living in all these new houses? Because there's nothing on moving employment north. Where people want to live is where there's good employment. And coming from Kent, I know what overdevelopment means, and also how overemployment works, and that worries me.
I'm just trying to pick up the point I was trying to ask about, actually. It's in paragraph 3.4 on page 104. Maybe I misunderstood it. It says, however, the government acknowledges that there are data gaps in terms of calculating housing needs, which will require the publication of further guidance. That may or may not apply to us, might it?
We think that applies to us, yes.
We think it does apply to us.
Yes.
So that's where we need to be cautious about what that says. Yeah, okay. Any other members? Ken, did I call you? I did I?
Yeah. Just depending on the detail, I think the increase in the planning fees is to be welcomed to help us. Just on the green energy issue, I think we need to be careful about, or need to be wary of this proposal to increase, for example, solar farm thresholds and what implications that might have for our landscapes and landscape character. And the final one I would say is about local plans. I would hope that we could make a case to seek to ensure that whatever changes the transitional arrangements and such like are, that we can reduce, the government reduces as far as possible the amount of reworking that we might have to do, given the amount that has already been done, the cost in time and other resources like finance, and the consultation processes that have gone through, trying to minimise that, the implications that there might be for having to significantly rework our developing local plan. Thank you, Chair.
Extra thoughts as well. Yeah, one thing I think we've always got to be careful when we respond is to not just present it as a no, but as a positive within the parameters of our legislation. So there are important areas for us as well about sustainable communities, but that's being in the right proportion. I know the Dales were very concerned about those numbers because of the points Martin made. You know, it's about scaling up beyond the amount of jobs and services available in that area, so that areas don't just become dormitories for housing. So it's about that kind of mixed use and sustainability point, but we can be positive at scale, and the same for renewables. You know, in the right places we can apply renewables at our, you know, in our buildings and in our villages and on farms. So it's about context and place again, just to present that positively.
If I may, just on that, Chair, National Parks England meeting on Tuesday afternoon, it was quite clear that government appears to be much more receptive to responses that are, if you like, solution-led, rather than, as you say, or negative. If they're listening to folk who are providing solutions to the problems that they perceive, and I think the if you like, the way in which our responses are constructed needs to reflect that.
I've got a meeting next week with the National Parks Heads of Planning to confer. Sarah and policy team are talking to the policy officers, and through our joint working group with Derbyshire Dales, we're also sharing our work at the district level as well, so that we can kind of present the idea of what's happening to a constrained area and the impact that has.
Can I just ask one question? This National Design Guide, stroke National Model Design Guide, are those now in existence, or is somebody still...
They exist, yes.
Sorry?
They exist. The National Design Guide's been around for a few years.
For how long?
At least 2 years. The National Design Guide. I think it came out in 2022, but don't quote me.
And does it say anything? I mean, we've never been told about it before.
It can be used. It has the same weight as the MPPF in decision making.
Oh, ought we to be told about it?
It's generally more tailored to larger developments, but it is something.
It's about estates.
It's large. It's generally tailored for that, but yeah, so it's more relevant when you're considering that scale of development.
Right. Okay. Right. Fine. Ginny, and then Ken.
Just picking up on Bill's point, really, can we make that point in this consultation about being able to condition building for local people, so that we can sustain our communities?
It's a point worth arguing for, isn't it? I don't think I'll take much notice, but I think it's worth arguing for. Yes. Okay. And Ken.
Just on that National Design Guide, we've been using it for years. But of course, in Barnsley, we're not looking at just one house in isolation. We do ours in
It must be out of date now. I mean, when you put that against the new requirements on nature conservation and all these other things, I don't believe it'll have caught up with that. Well, can I move that this report be noted and the resolution approved, the recommendation approved? And that's seconded. All those in favour? Anyone against? Sarah, thanks ever so much, and look forward to hearing from you further. And we've just got the report of the legal department. Sorry, the lawyer, solicitor, authority solicitor.
So it's just the appeals report, just for meeting.
Got another low energy house. I didn't know anything about that. And did you want to talk about Top Riley Lane?
Just to say, yeah, if members recall, this was the case that members refused on the basis that the pods were large and had separate bedrooms and kitchen and bathroom, and we said that went beyond the parameters of our policies for small, simple pods. An application came back which we approved more along those lines, but this is an appeal against the first decision, so they've now got an approval for the larger, more chalet-like pods in that location. I think we were content on that case that they were pretty minimal in landscape terms. I think they were well hidden on three sides by woodland, so it wasn't a big concern in landscape terms, that case. But I think it will raise some issues for policy going forward. We'll have to think carefully about how we draft that and how we frame our approach to these different products going forward. So it's certainly one to roll into the plan review process, I think. Thank you.
I'm just saying, it says the inspector considered that the proposal would not conflict with policy, etc., as it would not increase vehicular traffic along Riley Lane, which would be to the detriment of join to walkers and right. It's a very narrow lane, so I just don't get that, because I've used it. I've taken school groups up there because it's the only way to get to the Riley Graves from Eames, I can't see that that statement's right.
I think it depends how you read. I think it's rather badly phrased, that sentence. I think it depends on how you read it. You can read it as meaning that the proposal would not increase vehicular traffic, or you can read it as would not increase vehicular traffic that would be a detriment to the users. And I think that's his judgment.
I think on both points it's wrong, really.
Well,
I don't
but
care, but it must be. You know, if you've got people coming to and fro that didn't come to and fro, it must be detrimental. You know, in that quantity, it's not just one or two users.
We did raise that as part of the report. I don't think members felt that was the strong part of the decision.
Traffic as an issue in planning appeals is always very, very tricky. Right, shall we move that report be noted? And that, I think, brings the meeting to a conclusion.
Should we vote that?
What?
Do you want to vote on the...
No, I've counted them all already.
Oh, okay.
That is noted.